What's up guys, this is your favorite fanfic YouTuber, the Fanfic Majesty, and welcome to another amazing video. You can follow me on Patreon for exclusive stories. 9 Chapter 281 Appointment Advertisement Chapter 281 Appointment. It's good if there is an effect, then I will continue to study and dig deeper, Bruce said with a little excitement. After Bruce left, Tony couldn't control his excitement and kept smirking in his seat. Okay, stop giggling, it doesn't mean you can sit back and relax. Uchiha Madara couldn't help pouring a basin of cold water on Tony. Although he was woken up by Uchiha Madara's words, Tony was not angry and was still very happy. I know, but it means that I can at least live a little longer. Tony couldn't help but let his inner thoughts come out all at once. Uchiha Madara didn't expect Tony to have such an idea, and he didn't know how to answer for a while. Don't worry, we can definitely solve this problem completely, you won't die. Uchiha Madara finally patted Tony on the shoulder to comfort him. Self-pity is never Tony's style. Before, it was just a feeling. Tony quickly sorted out his emotions. Of course I won't die. I'm a unique genius. Without me, the world would lose a bit of color, Tony said very confidently. But after hearing Tony's arrogant words, Uchiha Madara smiled very comfortably and didn't feel that Tony was talking big. But after laughing, we still have to return to the topic, and it is obviously not a rational decision to rely on chlorophyll all the time. Don't be silly, hurry up and do research to see if there are other elements that can replace it, Uchiha Madara couldn't help urging. Although Tony usually seems to be giggling and doesn't care, but he is still very concerned about this matter, and immediately listened to Uchiha Madara's words and conducted research. And Uchiha Madara himself is not idle. After all, there are so many known elements now, and it is always necessary to experiment with the same. Uchiha Madara also went to help. This kind of research cannot be completed in a day or two. Uchiha Madara, Tony and Jarvis are 3 people who have studied for a week. Basically all the elements known now have been simulated, but obviously the results are not very good. Advertisement. And in this week, even though Tony has been taking chlorophyll every day, the concentration of the element is still increasing at a relatively slow rate. Sir, it's unfortunate that the device that saved your life is eroding your life at the same time, Jarvis said in a low voice. 0. Accompanying the sound was a picture of black veins appearing near the device on Tony's chest. If this toxin is allowed to continue to spread, it is estimated that such a terrifying situation will appear in Tony's whole body. Although the current situation is not very optimistic, it is fortunate that there will always be a period of time, so Uchiha Madara and Tony are not depressed. While Uchiha Madara and Tony were sharing each other's research, Miss Potts suddenly walked in. Uchiha Madara and Tony immediately shut their mouths. After all, Tony didn't want to tell Miss Bo about this. Pepper held a pile of documents in his hand, and the expression on his face was not very good. Seeing this scene, Uchiha Madara smiled at Tony and said, "You messed with her again? 99?" Although it is an interrogative sentence, the expression on Uchiha Madara's face is very certain, and Tony couldn't help showing a grieved expression when he heard the words. But before Tony could complain, Miss Potts walked in. "Tony, what the hell are you doing? You donate our entire modern collection to the Boy Scouts?" Miss Potts' tone was full of anger. After hearing this, Uchiha Madara finally knew why Miss Potts was so angry, which was simply not something a normal person could do. But Tony is obviously not in the range of normal people, and he just shrugged and replied, "No offense, but I think this should be my collection. I think I should be qualified to use the word us. After all, I have spent 10 years collecting this series," Miss Potts said with some grievances. Immediately afterwards, the 2 people suddenly talked and turned their direction to work. In short, Potts was complaining, and Tony didn't care about the company's affairs at all. Seeing this scene, Uchiha Madara was sitting on the chair and watching all this with a smile. It was like watching a play. Advertisement. But while he was talking, he suddenly turned the subject to Uchiha Madara. "Shouldn't be looking for me, wasn't he responsible for these projects before?" 35 Tony suddenly pointed at Uchiha Madara and said innocently. Unexpectedly, eating melons actually ate on his own body. Uchiha Madara couldn't help showing a speechless expression. "What does this have to do with me? You said that you don't have time, so let me handle it for you," Uchiha Madara said helplessly. However, after listening to Tony, he didn't feel embarrassed at all. Instead, he showed a thoughtful expression. Backquote. "How about the cases he handled before? Is it feasible?" After a moment of contemplation, Tony suddenly asked Potts. Potts didn't react at first, and after a while, he nodded towards Tony. "Of course, I have asked a professional to evaluate, and the prospect is very good." After getting such a reply, the smile on Tony's face became even weirder, and he turned his head to look at Uchiha Madara ring very seriously. "If that's the case, isn't that just right? I'll leave the company's affairs to you in the future." Tony looked at Uchiha Madara excitedly as if he had come up with a brilliant idea. But after hearing this, Uchiha Madara wanted to hammer Tony forward, thinking that Tony was completely crazy. "Do you know what you are talking about? This is your company and I have nothing to do with it." Uchiha Madara's tone was full of helplessness. "Li Hao Hao." But Tony obviously didn't think so. He thought he had come up with an excellent idea and completely ignored Uchiha Madara's words. "I'm really a genius, let's do it like this. I now officially appoint you as CEO of Stark Group," Tony said very excitedly. "Can you wake up a bit, don't go crazy." Uchiha Madara reached out and patted Tony on the back, hoping to wake Tony up. Even Miss Potts, who has always been very calm, widened her eyes, feeling as if she could no longer understand what Tony said. But Tony felt that he had come up with a brilliant idea, and ran to Uchiha Madara, looking directly into Uchiha Madara's eyes, and the whole person was very excited. Don't say anything, just let it be. I will officially appoint you as the CEO of Stark Group now, irrevocably. Tony's tone was unprecedentedly serious. Chapter 282 Accepting Appointment Advertisement Chapter 282 Accepting Appointment. At first Uchiha Madara didn't take Tony's words to heart at all, thinking that Tony was joking. But seeing Tony's serious expression now, Uchiha also gradually understood, couldn't help but widened his eyes and looked at Tony with an incredible expression. I think you're completely crazy, it's not something you can do your own way. Uchiha Madara couldn't help but say to Tony. But this time, Tony obviously had already thought about it. He walked to the bar with a calm expression, took 2 glasses of champagne and handed it to Uchiha Madara and Potts. On the contrary, I am sober like never before. This is a decision I made after careful consideration. Tony said to Uchiha Madara very seriously. Faced with such a resolute Tony, Uchiha Madara didn't know how to persuade him, so he could only sit on the sofa and drink champagne with a speechless expression. But you also know that your decision was a bit sudden, so you explained it to Uchiha Madara very seriously. I'm really not kidding, you are the most suitable candidate, I have already considered this matter. Tony's expression was unprecedentedly serious. If Tony goes his own way, Uchiha Madara still knows how 533 can deal with this. But now the expression on Tony's face is very complicated, and Uchiha Madara doesn't know how to persuade Tony. You know, I'm more suited to be a scientist than a businessman. Seeing that Uchiha Madara was just tasting the wine by himself and didn't answer his own question, Tony wasn't angry, but continued talking on his own. In order for my company not to go bankrupt, I really need a qualified person to take care of it, and you are undoubtedly the best of all. While Uchiha Madara isn't fooled by these rainbow farts, it's always a joy to hear compliments. So the expression on Uchiha Madara's face was not as stiff as before, but turned to look at Tony to see how many reasons Tony could find. Advertisement Tony also understands the character of Uchiha Madara. These money powers are really easy for Uchiha Madara, so Uchiha Madara doesn't care. Therefore, Tony also understands that Uchiha Madara, a Stark group, has not taken it seriously, so he directly played the emotional card. No matter what, this group is my father's hard work, Tony said meaningfully, but Uchiha Madara didn't know how to answer what he said. Howard is indeed Uchiha Madara's confidant. Tony moved Howard out, and Uchiha Madara is indeed difficult to refuse. And managing a group doesn't seem to be difficult for Uchiha Madara, so thinking about the expression on Uchiha Madara's face makes him hesitate. And Tony also saw the hope and immediately made persistent efforts, hoping to get rid of the hot potato of the Stark group as soon as possible. If other people knew, Stark Group has become a hot potato in the live broadcast class and Tony here, it is estimated that these people will be so angry that they vomit blood and die. But no matter what, Tony had already said it for the sake of it, and Uchiha Madara really couldn't refuse. After hesitating for a while, he chose to help. However, this does not mean that Uchiha Madara directly regards the Stark Group as his responsibility, and the ugly words still have to be said ahead. I'm only managing for you temporarily. After you've dealt with all these things, this is still your own company. Uchiha Madara said with a serious face. There is a lot of meaning that Tony will never take over if he doesn't agree. Anyway, Tony is just thinking about throwing out the Stark Group as soon as possible. There are other things to talk about later, so Tony can't wait to answer. Although Uchiha Madara is willing to accept the position of CEO, it is naturally impossible for Uchiha Madara to bind himself to the company all the time. AFBB, so Miss Potts is very important now. Uchiha Madara turned her head to look at Miss Potts and asked. I am still a newcomer in the workplace. I wonder if you are willing to help me? 39. All of this happened so quickly that Potts still hasn't recovered. After hearing Uchiha Madara's words, he just nodded in confusion. Advertisement. Although it looks dull, Pepper's professionalism is very high. After he wakes up, he arranges this matter in an orderly manner. This is a very significant personnel change, and various interests within the group are intertwined, so it is not something that Tony can solve with one appointment. I still need to go to the notary office for a lot of notarization, so after receiving this hot potato, Uchiha Madara has been busy handing over the company for the past few days. After getting busy, Uchiha Madara regretted countless times that he was soft-hearted at that time, and should not have taken over this group, it was too time-consuming. But there is no regret medicine in the world, and Uchiha Madara's character is either don't do it, and do it best if you do it. So these days, I really don't have much time to do other things, but I have been studying the Stark Group. Now that Tony has handed over the group to Uchiha Madara, it is naturally impossible for Uchiha Madara to let the group retreat. You must know that every move of the Stank Group is under the watchful eyes of countless people, not to mention the change of CEO. Many people outside have heard the wind. But because the final result has not yet come out, these people did not make any action on the surface, but in private they have been inquiring about Uchiha Madara's news. Although these people are very curious about Uchiha Madara, but with the help of Jarvis and Fury, Uchiha Madara's true identity is kept tightly hidden. These people only found out that it was Mr. Y who accepted the Stark Group, but this sense of mystery made other people even more curious, and it was simply enough to whet the appetite. Originally, Uchiha Madara's character was not a high-profile person, and Uchiha Madara would not move like a mountain if those people outside were scratching their hearts. After a few days of hectic work, I finally got everything done. It only needs Tony to sign the documents in the notary office, and the matter will be solved. It was indeed because of the help of Miss Potts that things could be completed so quickly. For those with absolute strength, Uchiha Madara will naturally not treat him badly, The first thing was the decision to make Miss Potts the vice president, and Tony had no problem with Uchiha Madara's decision. After preparing all the materials, Uchiha Madara took Miss Potts to find Tony. Chapter 283 Natalie Advertisement Chapter 23 Natalie. Probably because he felt like he threw a burden out, so Tony had been very leisurely these days, and inexplicably practiced boxing. When Uchiha Madara brought Pepper over, he found that Tony was very happy to practice boxing, and he even showed a smug smile after seeing Uchiha Madara. Stop laughing, laugh again, be careful I run away, hurry up and sign this. Uchiha Madara glared at Tony and said a little, helplessly. Just as Uchiha Madara and Tony were talking, a red-haired, very graceful-looking woman suddenly walked into the door. Tony couldn't help widening his eyes when he saw the woman, and then Tony was punched in the head. Uchiha Madara rolled his eyes at Tony. But Tony was obviously unrepentant. Instead he turned to the lady with a smile and asked, Hello lady, what's your name? My name is Rushman, Natalie Rushman. The lady smiled at Tony and replied. This is obviously a newcomer. Uchiha Madara doesn't remember seeing such a number one person in Stark Group, so he turns his eyes on Pepper. But before Pepper could answer, Tony had another moth. Okay, Natalie, come to this boxing ring, Tony said rudely, and Pepper couldn't help rolling his eyes when he heard this, and then wanted to stop Tony's actions. But obviously Tony didn't listen at all, so Natalie smiled at Uchiha Madara and Pepper and walked over. But after Natalie passed, Tony walked down from the boxing ring and sat beside Uchiha Madara. Uchiha Madara kept looking at his tablet, ignoring Tony because there were still some things to do. After Tony called Uchiha Madara's name, Uchiha Madara looked up at Tony. Who is this? Never seen before, Tony asked curiously while drinking chlorophyll. Uchiha Madara had asked this question before, but was interrupted by Tony and now looked at Pepper. It's a newly recruited employee who is responsible for legal matters. Pepper replied very seriously. Advertisement, I think I need a new assistant now. Tony leaned on the sofa and said in a more sloppy tone. I know now. There are 3 very good candidates, and you can interview them in person now. Pepper replied without looking up. However, Tony was very willful in this matter, and he didn't want to see the 3 candidates at all. I don't think I have much time to meet those 3 candidates now, just her, she is the most suitable candidate, Tony said willfully. Originally, Uchiha Madara's attention was on the tablet in his hand, but after hearing this, Uchiha Madara naturally couldn't pretend that he didn't know anything. So Uchiha Madara looked up at Tony helplessly and said, Can you control yourself? I don't want to see you on social news. But because Uchiha Madara's tone was not serious, Tony was also smiling and didn't take Uchiha Madara's words to heart. How is it possible? I just need an assistant, how could such a thing happen? Tony said with a smile. In the face of Tony Uchiha Madara who was not righteous, he didn't care at all, but after Tony asked the lady's name, he began to fiddle with Google. Really let Tony search out the information of this lady. Natalie is indeed a very good person, Grandmaster has many foreign languages. But Uchiha Madara always feel that Natalie's temperament is very strange. But it feels like this kind of thing is almost a kind of metaphysics, so Uchiha Madara won't say much without concrete evidence. Just as Uchiha Madara was talking to Tony, he suddenly heard the sound of heavy objects falling to the ground from the boxing ring. Uchiha Madara looked up and found some unbelievable scenes. It was Happy being beaten to the ground by Natalie. This scene was so frightening that Pepper couldn't help screaming, and then stood up from the sofa. My god, what the hell is going on? Pepper's voice broke. Tony couldn't hide his surprise, and then whistled at Natalie. Although Uchiha Madara was also a little surprised, he was still able to control the emotions on his face. Advertisement 0. For flowers. I think you still have to think about it carefully, you may not be able to beat her, Uchiha Madara said meaningfully. Isn't this just right? I can be an assistant and a bodyguard, and I only need to pay a salary, Tony said with a smile. At this time, Natalie had also turned down from the boxing ring and walked in front of Uchiha Madara and Tony. I didn't expect you to have such strong fighting skills, but I was a little surprised, Uchiha Madara said with admiration. Hearing this, Natalie smiled humbly and said, It's just that I did some exercises before, so it's not really a Grandmaster. 35. Hearing this, Uchiha Madara also smiled and didn't say much. At this time, Natalie had also taken back the documents she had previously held and spread them out in front of Tony. You need to sign here and have your fingerprints printed, Natalie said to Tony. Tony didn't look carefully and just did as Natalie said. Okay, everything has been handed over smoothly, welcome you, our new CEO. Pepper smiled and extended a hand to Uchiha Madara. Uchiha Madara also smiled and reached out to squeeze Pepper's hand. I still need a lot of cooperation from you, I don't think I will be qualified, Uchiha Madara said very modestly. Although Uchiha Madara is the new CEO, Uchiha Madara only needs to control the general direction, and there are still many specific things that need to be handled by Pepper. After Pepper left, Tony smiled at Uchiha Madara and said, I want her to be my assistant. Although Tony did not name her by name, both Uchiha Madara and Tony were well aware of her. After hearing this request, Uchiha Madara smiled slightly at Tony, and then refused mercilessly in Tony's expectant eyes. Stop dreaming. After saying this, Uchiha patted Tony on the shoulder and left. Only Tony was still persistently following behind Uchiha Madara, chattering about it. But no matter what Tony said, Uchiha Madara was able to ignore Tony's words and move forward on his own. Chapter 284 Doubt Advertisement Chapter 284 Doubt. But how could someone with a character like Uchiha Madara change his decision just because of Tony's few words? So no matter how persuasion you ask, Uchiha Madara is very determined. In the end, Tony could only sigh helplessly and then gave up his idea. After sending Tony away, Uchiha Madara sat in his office chair, unconsciously turning the pen in his hand, thinking of Natalie thoughtfully. Although I feel that this kind of thing is not very reliable, Uchiha Madara is very confident in her own feelings, and Natalie does have a place that makes people feel inconsistent. Not to mention anything else, just referring to the move that Natalie showed in the boxing ring today, it is not a move that an ordinary woman can make. Although Natalie explained that she, 533, had been trained before, but Happy is also a strong man. In addition, as Tony's driver, he has also received a lot of professional guidance, and his performance will not be worse than that of the military. So it's even more surprising that Natalie can solve Happy in one move. Although there are already a lot of speculations in his heart, Uchiha Madara did not show it on the bright side, and he also had a business-like attitude towards Natalie. But in private, Uchiha Madara called Jarvis and let Jarvis keep an eye on Natalie's movements. And asked Jarvis to keep the matter absolutely secret, even Tony couldn't tell. Because Uchiha Madara's authority is the same as Tony's, Jarvis decided to do it without hesitation. It can be considered that one thing has been arranged, and Uchiha Madara is also slightly relieved. In the following days, Natalie behaved very normally and did not make any outrageous actions, and Uchiha Madara gradually put this matter behind her. After all, as the new CEO Uchiha Madara is not busy, there are too many things waiting for Uchiha Madara to deal with every day. Advertisement. There are still many people who want to take the opportunity to get to know Uchiha Madara, so Uchiha Madara is also very annoying when they have to deal with people who come and try to get in touch every day. But fortunately, after Uchiha Madara dealt with a few people who didn't have long eyes, others gradually understood, and naturally they didn't dare to disturb Uchiha Madara. After keeping all the annoying things out, Uchiha Madara can finally rectify the inside of the group. After all, Tony didn't care about things before. Although Pepper had Tony's support in charge of the affairs of the group, it was not right in the end. Although there is no serious business before, but Uchiha Madara is indeed talented in this matter, at least now Stark Group's stock is rising all the way. Because of the addition of Uchiha Madara, many cooperation plans that have been delayed for a long time in the group have gradually been relaunched. Since it is necessary to conduct professional evaluations to carry out cooperation, Natalie naturally has more contact with Uchiha Madara. Although Natalie didn't do anything strange, Uchiha Madara never let go of her doubts, and now is a good time. In the identity of Uchiha Madara, an assistant group was formed directly, but there are not many Grandmaster Law people in these assistant groups, and they are still recruiting. So Uchiha Madara directly promoted Natalie. If Tony made this request, Pepper would naturally not agree. But since Uchiha Madara said it, Pepper sent Natalie over without saying a word. After changing positions, Natalie's first thing was to go to the office to find Uchiha Madara to report. After Natalie came in, Uchiha Madara gave Natalie a kind smile. You are welcome to join. If you don't understand anything, you can ask other people. I hope you can get along well. Uchiha Madara stretched out a hand towards the tower as she spoke. Natalie also smiled, and then shook back Uchiha Madara's outstretched hand, but as soon as she touched Natalie's hand, Uchiha Madara immediately noticed something was wrong. Normally, Natalie is just a 20-year-old, and it is impossible for a normal woman to have so many simple things in her hands. After all, according to the information found by Uchiha Madara, Natalie's life is not very difficult, and the distribution of calluses on Natalie's hands is very regular. Advertisement. I think people like Uchiha Madara, who came out of the army, knew all of this at once. It was simply because the weapons were used too much. Especially the cocoon on the tiger's mouth. If it is not holding a gun all the year round, it is impossible for such a situation to occur. After a little touch, Uchiha Madara discovered many details that she had never known before. Basically, through such a handshake, Uchiha Madara can determine that Natalie's identity is not simple. It is because of this that Uchiha Madara is more curious about Natalie's identity, as if Natalie is either a mercenary or an agent. But the Stark Group is just a business group, and Uchiha Madara can't be sure what purpose Natalie came for. Just a short handshake time, Uchiha Madara's heart has basically played a big show, but his face is still calm. But Natalie seemed to sense Uchiha Madara's suspicions, and withdrew her hand and smiled at Uchiha Madara. And Uchiha Madara didn't find anything, so naturally he started talking to Natalie about work. The contract of this plan, I want to see it before I get off work today, you can go out, Uchiha Madara said calmly. Natalie nodded towards Uchiha Madara and quickly opened the door and left. After Natalie left, Uchiha Madara called out Jarvis and said, Jarvis, can you find more detailed information about Natalie 1.1? I don't know, sir, but I'm willing to try. Jarvis Yuga's voice came out. Okay, I hope to get this information as soon as possible. Uchiha Madara nodded and said to Jarvis, then fell into deep thought. After Uchiha Madara's order, Jarvis quickly went to do this, and Jarvis came out when he got off work. However, this time the omnipotent Jarvis did not bring good news. According to Jarvis, it seems that there is no problem with Natalie's identity. But Uchiha Madara has already found out that something is wrong with Natalie, and naturally she won't believe it. After all, it is not difficult to completely hide a person's information. Chapter 285 Field Accident Advertisement. Chapter 285 Field Accident. Therefore, Uchiha Madara just kept this matter in mind, and did not let Jarvis continue to investigate. After all, there is no need. Uchiha Madara didn't tell anyone about this matter except Jarvis, but silently remembered it in her heart, and the days passed without any surprises. Under the leadership of Uchiha Madara, Stark is completely thriving, and there are more and more things to deal with. Therefore, when Tony proposed to attend an overseas meeting, Uchiha Madara directly handed the matter to Tony without showing up. After all, although Tony usually behaves a little willful, but in the end it is the Stark group that has been in charge for a long time, and he can still do well in attending meetings. But before leaving, Uchiha Madara still called Tony over and warned him very seriously. "What's the concentration in the blood now?" Uchiha Madara glanced at Tony, who was sitting very boldly, and asked. Tony, who had always had a bright smile on his face when he heard this question, unconsciously turned his eyes dark, but he soon returned to his cynical look. "It's all right, I can't die after all, and I can hold on for another 05, Tony said casually. But Uchiha Madara didn't like to hear such words, and couldn't help but glare at Tony. After seeing Uchiha Madara's gaze, Tony restrained his expression and said in a low voice, "About 45%, 35. After hearing such an answer, Uchiha Madara couldn't help but sigh, feeling a little down. "Don't forget to prepare enough chlorophyll and use less equipment. This world can run without Iron Man," Uchiha Madara couldn't help but mutter. Knowing that Uchiha Madara was also doing it for his own good, Tony didn't get angry after hearing this, but nodded obediently. In any case, Uchiha Madara has explained everything that he should explain, and how to do it depends on Tony himself. Soon Tony set off with a full force, while Uchiha Madara stayed in the group to handle things. The first few days were calm. After all, this is a very big thing, so there are news reports every day. Advertisement Uchiha Madara watched every day and found that Tony was very well behaved this time. Seeing Tony's high-spirited appearance this time, Uchiha Madara's heart was also very happy for Tony. But before Uchiha Madara was happy for a long time, there was news from the front, and he found out that something happened again. Tony, who was only going to the conference, was going to race for no reason. He knew that with Tony's physical condition, he couldn't participate in such an exciting game at all. Uchiha Madara called Pepper immediately after seeing the news in the news reports. But Pepper's tone was also very anxious, and found that it was too late, and Tony had already set off on the track. Now that everything has happened, Uchiha Madara can only sigh helplessly, letting Pepper keep an eye on Tony's physical condition. But just before hanging up the phone, he heard Pepper screaming suddenly, and Uchiha Madara also felt that something was wrong. "What's the matter? What happened?" Uchiha Madara asked anxiously, and hurriedly turned on the live broadcast of the match. Then Uchiha Madara found that the field was in chaos, and a shirtless man armed with very rudimentary equipment appeared on the field. And this man held two whips in his hands, both of which were charged with electricity. This man had a very serious face, and mercilessly whipped his whip on the passing cars, and Tony's car had already overturned to the ground. It was obvious that this person was aimed at Tony, and went directly to Tony's car. As soon as the braid went down, Tony's car was split in half, but fortunately Tony reacted quickly enough and ran away. "Damn it, hurry up and have Happy bring the device into him," Uchiha Madara said in a very anxious tone. Although the heart was also greatly impacted, Pepper still woke up anyway, and immediately went to arrange this matter. After making arrangements, Uchiha Madara looked at everything on the field with a serious face. Soon Uchiha Madara saw Happy driving a black car into it, and just as the man was about to hit Tony, a car hit the man. Advertisement This move bought a lot of time for Tony, and Pepper also took this opportunity to throw the steel suit in his hand to Tony. But this man was very tenacious. Even though blood was spitting out of his mouth, he kept swinging the whip in his hand. The black car that Happy drove was basically smashed to pieces, leaving only a shelf inside. Fortunately, at the most critical juncture, Pepper still successfully threw the steel battle suit in his hand in front of Tony, and Tony quickly armed himself. However, this does not mean that everything is fine. After all, the whip waving in this person's hand is charged with electricity. And Tony's suits are all made of metal, so this battle is really not easy to fight. The whip in this man's hand hit Tony again and again, and Uchiha Madara could see that Tony's suit was scorched. But no matter what, Tony finally won 537 and solved this man. But the price is also very painful. There was a small explosion at the location, and Tony's battlesuit was almost destroyed. However, the injury suffered by this person was obviously heavier. Even so, when he was dragged out again, this person still laughed arrogantly. "You failed, Tony Stark, you failed." The man seemed to be not very good at English, and kept shouting in slightly accented English. It seems that this person knew Tony from the beginning, and Uchiha Madara didn't know what happened, or had to wait for follow-up investigation. But no matter what, seeing that Tony didn't have any major problems, Uchiha Madara was relieved. But after thinking about it, Uchiha Madara is still not at ease, and is ready to visit this place in person. Now that the transportation is so convenient, Uchiha Madara quickly arranged a private plane and was ready to go. Although Uchiha Madara may fly faster in the past, after all, it has to pass through the airspace of other countries, which has some troubles to implement. So Uchiha Madara chose to be a good citizen who obeyed the law. After a long flight of more than 10 hours, Uchiha Madara finally arrived at the place. After getting off the plane, Uchiha Madara didn't have much time to rest, so he went to find Tony immediately. Chapter 286 Questioning Advertisement Chapter 286 Questioning. Probably this sudden incident had a very big impact on Tony. After Uchiha Madara arrived at the hotel, he saw Tony sitting quietly by the window. Tony looked at the scenery outside, and the whole person exuded a feeling of sullenness. But now is not the time of sadness. Uchiha Madara strode directly over, slapped Tony on the back, and woke Tony up. What are you doing sitting here? Are the findings out? Uchiha Madara asked Tony. After waking up, Tony saw Uchiha Madara showing an embarrassed smile, and then shook his head slightly. It should be still interrogated now, and the result has not come out yet, Tony replied in a low voice. What are you still doing here? Go and watch them work, Uchiha Madara said in a tone of hatred. It can be seen that Tony wants to refute, but he can't find any excuse, especially after seeing Uchiha Madara's eyes. Tony swallows all the words back. Then Tony stood up very obediently, ready to find out the progress of this matter now. Now that they have all come, Uchiha Madara naturally didn't think about taking a rest, and soon followed behind Tony and went to the police station together. In the final analysis, this incident is the fault of these security personnel, and the police have already been contacted for such a grand event. But this person was still able to get in and caused such a huge loss, so these policemen were also a little flustered in their hearts. So as soon as they arrived at the police station, Uchiha Madara and Tony received a very warm reception, but these sugar-coated shells had no effect on Uchiha Madara's side. How's the interrogation work going? I need to know the result. Uchiha Madara asked very bluntly, not wanting to waste any time. After hearing Uchiha Madara's question, a slightly embarrassed smile appeared on the faces of these people. But Uchiha Madara had already spoken, and these people naturally did not dare not answer. Finally, a middle-aged man came up and smiled slightly embarrassedly at Uchiha Madara. Advertisement: we are already interrogating this matter. Everyone attaches great importance to this matter, and a result will be announced soon. Although the words are very nice, but the specific results have not come out, everything is in vain. So after hearing these words, Uchiha just nodded very coldly in the middle of the night, and then sat in a chair without saying a word. The atmosphere in the police station was very embarrassing. Although the others have relieved a little, there is some awkward atmosphere now, but the two bosses are not very good looking, and no one dares to say anything more sitting here. In this suffocating atmosphere, the door of the interrogation room finally opened, and everyone else was relieved to see this scene. But it turns out that all the ease is an illusion. Although the policeman in charge of the interrogation work has come out, the expression on his face is also bad. Soon the leading police officer walked up to Uchiha Madara and Tony with a very embarrassed smile. Sorry, he doesn't want to speak anything, and he doesn't seem to speak English. The man's tone was full of guilt and fear. However, Uchiha Madara and Tony didn't care about such an ordinary employee, they just waved their hands slightly indifferently. Since the cops couldn't get anything out of the man's mouth, Uchiha Madara had no choice but to do it himself. Where is the interrogation room? Should we be able to go in? Uchiha Madara asked the person in charge directly. To be honest, I didn't ask any useful information, which is already the mistake of these policemen. How dare to refuse Uchiha Madara's request now? After hearing this question, he nodded quickly. After getting permission, Uchiha Madara took Tony into the interrogation room. After all, this person is obviously aimed at Tony, so bringing Tony may get unexpected results. Led by other police officers, Uchiha Madara and Tonic entered the interrogation room and found the man sitting with his back to the door, not doing anything after hearing the movement from the door. You said I failed, but obviously you are the biggest loser, otherwise you shouldn't be here. Tony glanced at the man's back and couldn't help but sarcastically said. Advertisement. But this person seemed to be deaf and had no response at all. Tell him something useful and tell him where he failed. Uchiha Madara glanced at the man's back and said casually. Actually, the technology is good, but the cycle per second is really slow, you should double the speed. Tony said and walked in front of this man. It can be seen from the naked eye that this person's equipment is indeed very rudimentary, so it also made Tony pick out a lot of faults, and finally Tony came to a conclusion. Backquote. As barely called a pass-through copycat. 35. After Tony's evaluation, the man finally had a little reaction and looked up at Tony. Seeing that this method was effective, Uchiha Madara gave Tony a look and motioned Tony to continue. With such technology, you can sell it to other countries, or sell it on the black market, and you have no shortage of such connections. 95. In fact, it was completely reasonable for Tony to say this, but after hearing this, a slightly disdainful smile appeared on this person's face. Just when Tony was a little impatient, the man finally made a move and looked up into Tony's eyes. Your family is all thieves and executioners, and now you want to repeat the past. Li Haojiao forget the lives destroyed by the Stark family. The person said in jerky English. There is something inexplicable about this accusation, and there is something to be said about the thief Uchiha Madara. Speaking of thieves, where did you get this design from? Uchiha Madara asked with a cold face. After hearing Uchiha Madara's words, the expression on Tony's face also became serious, and he looked at the person in front of him with a cold expression. My father, Anton Fanko. Faced with Uchiha Madara's questioning, this man did not panic at all, and said in a very calm tone. Uchiha Madara thought that Tony should know this person, otherwise there is no way to explain why this person has such a design in his hand. But I didn't expect Tony to be confused when he heard the name. Well, I've never heard this name before. Tony frowned and said lucklessly. Chapter 287 Vacation Proposal. Advertisement. Chapter 287 Vacation Proposal. Uchiha Madara was always paying attention to the micro-expression on this man's face, and when he heard Tony say that he didn't know the name, a trace of anger flashed on this man's face. My father is the reason you are alive. The man approached Tony and said very seriously. But to the ears of Uchiha Madara and Tony, there is indeed something inexplicable about this remark. The reason I'm alive is that you also had a chance, but you didn't take it. Tony retorted. Hearing this, the man suddenly laughed and looked at Tony with some mocking eyes. Really, if someone can make God bleed, people will give up their faith, but when the blood drips, it will attract sharks, said the person meaningfully. Look, this world will consume you one day, I just need to sit here and watch quietly. 35. What he said was rude, and Tony was naturally very angry after hearing it. But Uchiha Madara felt a little nervous, which is what Uchiha Madara is worried about now. But looking at Tony's state now, Uchiha Madara also understands that persuasion won't work, he can only be vigilant. After saying those inexplicable words, the man turned his attention to Uchiha Madara. 540. It's not a good choice to work for such a person, my father is your example. This person obviously did not know the identity of Uchiha Madara, and persuaded. Your father's lesson. It doesn't look like it's ending well for him. Uchiha Madara shrugged and replied calmly. However, this person is also very shrewd, and after hearing Uchiha Madara's words, he did not fall for it, but laughed while sitting in his seat. Maybe your ending will be worse than my father's. The Stark family is a thief, and they will steal all your achievements. The man said maliciously. But Tony obviously couldn't stand the yin and yang of this man, and suddenly stood up from his chair and shouted, Enough, watch it in prison. Advertisement. After speaking, Tony angrily walked towards the door. Uchiha Madara sighed helplessly when he saw Tony's anger. But just when Tony was about to touch the doorknob, the man suddenly spoke again, holding Tony back. Hey, wait Tony, the palladium element is in the body, and dying because of the palladium element should be a AFBB, very painful thing. The man said with a smile. But after hearing this, Tony pretended to be in place, and Uchiha Madara was also very surprised, which was simply too weird. Even Pepper didn't know about Tony's palladium poisoning, but this person was able to get the news, which was weird and scary. Seeing the uncomfortable expression on Tony's face, Uchiha Madara reached out and patted Tony's shoulder, reminding Tony to control his emotions. After calming down, Uchiha Madara left the police station with Tony without changing his face. After all, there is no useful information to ask now, and there is no need to waste time. On the way back to the flight, Uchiha Madara's phone basically never stopped, and has been dealing with the follow-up of this matter. To be honest, the steel suit is indeed a hindrance to many people. Those congressmen have already wanted to deal with Tony, but the last hearing was not very successful. But this incident gave these congressmen hope. The congressman who was in charge of organizing the hearing members before stood up, accepted an interview, and expressed his dissatisfaction with Tony. But this time Tony really couldn't refute this matter. After all, during the hearing, Tony had guaranteed that the steel suit would not appear in the hands of anyone else. After seeing this interview, Tony's face was extremely poor, and he quickly asked Jarvis to turn off his voice. Pepper sat on the seat with a worried look, and wanted to ask about the specific situation, but he didn't know where to start. At this time, Tony took 2 trays and placed them in front of Uchiha Madara and Pepper, and opened them with 2 food that did not look very good. Did you do this? Pepper used a very surprised tone. Hearing this question, a smug smile appeared on Tony's face. Otherwise, what do you think I've been doing a few hours ago? Tony smiled and said proudly. Seeing that Tony is in good condition now, Pepper is also relieved, hesitated for a moment and asked the question he has always been curious about. Advertisement. Is there something you two are hiding from me? I think you are weird. Pepper asked hesitantly. Obviously Tony is not a liar, and when he heard this question, Genshin Impact began to be erratic, which is obviously a sign of guilty conscience. However, Uchiha Madara didn't do anything wrong, so naturally he wouldn't feel guilty. Hearing this question, he directly kicked the ball to Tony again. Who knows, but I have nothing to hide from you. Uchiha Madara shrugged and replied calmly. Seeing Uchiha Madara's righteous look, Pepper turned his attention to Tony. After hesitating for a moment, Tony just said awkwardly, I don't want to go back, let's go on vacation. This topic is too jumpy, even Uchiha Madara has some speechless glances at Tony. In the slightly speechless eyes of Uchiha Madara and Pepper, Tony remained very calm, and the more he thought about it, the more he felt that his proposal was simply too good. I really don't want to see anyone right now. Cancel my birthday party. We can go to Garp Island for a vacation. Tony said very seriously. Originally, Uchiha Madara was still on the phone, trying to minimize the influence of this matter, so he didn't take Tony's words to heart at all. But after seeing Tony's expression, Uchiha Madara knew that Tony was serious, put down the phone in his hand unconsciously, and looked at Tony helplessly. Do you know what you're talking about? Escape is useless, we still have to learn to face it. Uchiha Madara said with some helplessness. Of course I know, but we can settle this matter after we relax ourselves, Tony said as a matter of course. But Tony, this is our CEO, there are a lot of things to deal with. Pepper couldn't help but persuade. But Tony seems to have already thought of an excuse, and no one persuades him. Precisely because he's the CEO, he's certainly entitled to give himself a vacation, Tony said very seriously. I have to say that Tony is a logical genius, and there is no problem with saying this. Advertisement Chapter 288 Investigation. Advertisement. Chapter 288 Investigation. After hearing Tony's words, Uchiha Madara couldn't help but glanced at Tony with complicated eyes and said, I never knew you were such a good debater. 55. I don't know if Tony understood or didn't understand, but Tony showed a smug smile at Uchiha Madara and accepted the compliment without any guilt. Immediately afterwards, Tony put his anticipation on Uchiha Madara, hoping that Uchiha Madara could agree to his request. But it was obviously not a good time, so Uchiha Madara rejected Tony mercilessly. I thought you were no longer a child, you need to understand the priorities. Uchiha Madara glanced at Tony and said. Hearing this answer, Tony was not surprised in his heart, but there was still a lost expression on his face. Originally, Uchiha Madara made up her mind and didn't want to take care of you. But when he thought that the concentration of palladium in Tony's body was still soaring, Uchiha Madara couldn't help feeling sympathy for Tony. There are still many opportunities in the future, but it is really time to go back now. Uchiha Madara hesitated for a moment, and said softly. In fact, Tony doesn't really have to go on vacation, but he has some anxiety in his heart. After all, the concentration of palladium in Tony's body is still increasing. Therefore, after hearing Uchiha Madara's words, Tony didn't bother too much, and a smile quickly appeared on his face. Well, I hope you don't forget what I said today. I regret making you the CEO. It's too busy. Tony couldn't help but whisper. Because Tony's voice was too low, Uchiha Madara didn't hear what Tony was saying, and quickly turned his attention to other things. I remember that when I was the CEO, I wasn't so busy. Tony suddenly said without knowing what he was thinking. Uchiha Madara didn't have a particularly big reaction after hearing this, but Pepper gave Tony an angry look. Because you threw your work to me before, you will naturally relax. Pepper's voice was full of resentment. In the face of Pepper's accusation, Tony probably felt a little embarrassed, smiled, and then began to change the subject. Advertisement. Although the method is very clumsy, Pepper is not really complaining, so the topic is quickly diverted. After returning to Malibu Beach, Uchiha Madara still had no time to spare. After all, this matter was too much trouble. A lot of people started calling Uchiha Madara to inquire about the situation. The most important thing is that many people think that after such a thing happened, they are not very optimistic about the future of Stark Group. Basically since getting off the plane, Uchiha Madara's phone has not stopped. To be honest, if it wasn't for Tony's palladium poisoning, Uchiha Madara really couldn't wait to resign. After taking such a long call, Uchiha Madara was really impatient, and threw the phone directly to Pepper and Natalie to let them deal with the matter. Uchiha Madara went to find Tony. To be honest, this incident was hopeless for Tony, and no one knew that such a thing would happen. But sometimes the world is like this. Obviously it is not Tony's fault, but because Tony is famous, all the reasons will be pushed to Tony. Obviously, Tony's heart should be very unhappy, and he locked himself in the laboratory after getting off the plane, and he didn't know what he was tinkering with. Seeing Tony like this, Uchiha Madara didn't want to say more. After all, it's not Tony's fault for this too much, so Uchiha Madara asked Anton Vanko instead. Every word that the madman said before was imprinted in Uchiha Madara's mind. Although this person's actions are very crazy, there is no problem in spirit. According to this person's description, Anton Vanko should be the key to the matter. Apparently, Tony also had the same idea as Uchiha Madara, and soon asked Jarvis to check the information of this Anton Vanko. For Jarvis, it was nothing more than a breeze, and quickly put Anton Vanko's information in front of Uchiha Madara and Tony. Anton Vanki was a physicist in the former Soviet Union, but defected to the country in 1963. For flowers. Advertisement. It was just that he was soon accused of spying during this period, and then deported in 6 or 7 years. The person who attacked Tony was named Ivan, the son of Vanko, who was sentenced for selling weapons raw materials from the former Soviet Union to other countries. Ivan spent 15 years in prison, and that was all Jarvis could find. Jarvis also collected some pictures, and after listening to Jarvis' description, Uchiha Madara glanced at Tony. Do you know this Anton Vanko? I don't think there will be any intersection between you. Uchiha Madara asked with a frown. But Tony also frowned and looked at everything on the projector, his eyes filled with confusion. It can be seen that Tony does not know the father and son, so there is something strange about all this happening. 0. After all, according to Ivan's story, Tony and Ivan are just like having a bloody feud. Before Uchiha Madara and Tony could discuss the reason, there was a movement at the door. Uchiha Madara looked up and found that Colonel Roddy had come down. After seeing Colonel Roddy appear, Uchiha Madara silently swallowed all the words that had already reached his lips, and some looked at Colonel Roddy curiously. It could be seen that Colonel Roddy was not very happy when he appeared here this time. He frowned and looked at Tony very urgently. Tony, you have to hurry up and preside over the situation. I have received countless calls from the National Guard, and everyone is watching you. Roddy's tone was full of worry. But Tony just stood motionless on the position, and there was no special reaction. Under such circumstances, Roddy doesn't need to ask you for a response, but just said all the news he knew. You'd better resolve this matter quickly, if you don't want them to rush here with tanks and confiscate everything. Roddy said urgently. It can be seen that those people outside should really be anxious, that's why Roddy is so worried. They really don't want to go around in circles anymore. You said that no one will master this technology within 20 years, but some people have successfully practiced it. Luo D said seriously B. Chapter 289 Roddy knows. Advertisement. Chapter 289 Roddy knows. Since Roddy has been worried about this, it means that Roddy must be the master and some inside information. Uchiha Madara can no longer watch Tony be so decadent. So when Roddy was anxiously circling the room, Uchiha Madara walked to Tony's side, reached out and patted Tony's shoulder. Are you all right, Tony? We have to deal with this, Uchiha Madara said to the motionless Tony. Roddy also walked to Uchiha Madara's side at this time, looking at Tony expectantly. After hearing Uchiha Madara's words, Tony just woke up from a big dream and looked up at Uchiha Madara. But this one looked up Uchiha Madara only to find that Tony's face was pale and terrifying, and it seemed that the whole person was not quite right. Uchiha Madara has always been with Tony, May 4-3, and he was a little surprised to see this scene, not to mention Rody. The last time we met, Tony was also high-spirited at the hearing and scolded all those who disliked him, but now Tony looks downright terrifying. So Roddy didn't care about the things he faced now, looked at Tony with a worried look, and kept asking. But Tony just gave Uchiha Madara and Roddy a far-fetched smile and said, I have nothing to do, let's go up now. Although I feel that Tony's state is not right now, Tony still keeps going out, and Uchiha Madara and Roddy can't stop it. When Tony got up from his position and walked down, he almost fell to the ground suddenly, but fortunately Uchiha Madara had quick eyes and quick hands, and held Tony with one hand. Colonel Roddy also quickly followed and supported Tony. Uchiha Madara put Tony in Roddy's hand, and he went to get the palladium energy plate on the table. You help him to rest there first, I'll go get something. Uchiha Madara said to Colonel Roddy. After getting the brand new palladium energy plate, Uchiha Madara walked up to Tony and took out the reactor in Tony's body. Then Uchiha Madara took off the old energy plate in the reactor and stuffed the new energy plate on it, and Roddy watched this scene in stunned eyes. Advertisement. What's the situation? Why is this thing smoking? And Tony, you put such a thing in your body? Roddy said in disbelief. But now the situation is more complicated. Uchiha Madara doesn't know how to explain to Roddy. Tony just turned around, obviously not wanting to say more. After Tony changed the energy board, Roddy could see the black veins on Tony's neck very sharply. What's up with that crossword puzzle around your neck? Roddy asked, frowning. Tony froze when he heard the question, and then said in a very calm tone, accidentally bruised. This excuse is simply bad, and Roddy's eyes were filled with 3 characters of disbelief. Seeing that Tony's condition was not very good, his whole body was full of discomfort, and his forehead was sweating, so Uchiha Madara went to get a lot of chlorophyll and put it in front of Tony. What's the situation? Can someone explain it to me? Roddy couldn't help asking. The situation is very complicated. In short, Tony is now living off this reactor. Uchiha Madara put it succinctly. Because what Uchiha Madara said was too simple, it gave Lodi a lot of room for association. Roddy's face changed suddenly, and he looked at Tony in a panic. Is that what I meant? Roddy asked in a very uncertain tone. Although he wanted to give Roddy a negative answer, Uchiha Madara still nodded at Roddy. My god, you are simply crazy, relying on such a small energy board with your life. 35 Roddy said in disbelief. I also wish I was crazy now, but on the contrary, I've never been more awake. Tony replied in a very calm tone. What the hell happened? What can you say? Let's solve it together. Roddy asked worriedly. There is no need to carry everything on your body, save the world alone, the world is not your responsibility. Advertisement. To be able to say such a thing, it shows that Roddy really regards Tony as his good friend, not Iron Man. But on this matter, Tony was very persistent, and he was unwilling to let go no matter what, and did not answer Roddy's words at all. And things have developed to this point, it is no longer time for Tony to make a choice, and now he is being pushed forward. It's a pity, it's too late now, Tony will really die without this energy board. Uchiha Madara briefly explained the current situation after looking at the worried Roddy. After listening to Uchiha Madara's narration, Roddy looked at Tony with very distressed and admiring eyes. I didn't expect that Tony, who has always been cynical, actually took on so many things in his heart. Is there really no other way? Chlorophyll can't cure Tony at all. Roddy looked at Uchiha Madara with hopeful eyes. But unfortunately this is not within the scope of Uchiha Madara's expertise, and Uchiha Madara is not really omnipotent. So under Roddy's ardent expectations, Uchiha Madara could only shake his head a little helplessly. I also really want to solve this trouble completely, but there is really no other way. Uchiha Madara's tone is full of pity. If you can, persuade him more, he doesn't need to save the world alone, and the world doesn't need him to save. Uchiha Madara said to Roddy. But after hearing Uchiha Madara's words, Roddy also had a wry smile on his face. If I could persuade him, things wouldn't have developed to this point. If it wasn't for you, I wouldn't know all about 1.1 at all. Roddy said sadly. Tony didn't mean to hide from you, it's just that his character is like that. Seeing some lost Roddy, Uchiha Madara couldn't help explaining to Tony. Because they have been with him for a long time, Roddy also understands Tony's character very well. After hearing Uchiha Madara's explanation, he also smiled and nodded. Of course I know Tony, I don't get mad at such a small thing, I just feel a little sad for Tony. Roddy explained in a very sincere tone. In fact, everyone is full of misunderstandings about Tony, but Tony has taken on everything by himself. As he spoke, Roddy's voice sank. It can be seen that Roddy really cares about Tony, and Uchiha Madara is also happy that Tony can make such a sincere friend. Chapter 290 Birthday Banquet. Advertisement. Chapter 290 Birthday Banquet. It's useless to talk about this now. I can only hope that the issue of the 100 yuan income will be resolved quickly. Uchiha Madara sighed and said helplessly. Roddy is indeed very concerned about Tony's health. After hearing Uchiha Madara's words, he immediately looked at Tony with great concern. Is there anything I can do? You're welcome, I'll try to help Tony. Roddy said in a very sincere tone. It's not needed for the time being. A special person has been commissioned to study this matter. Uchiha Madara explained. Uchiha Madara has already said so, and Roddy will say no more. I just emphasized again and again that once there is any problem, I can find myself, and I will do my best to help Tony. Then you should be busy first, those people outside are still watching, I will deal with you. Roddy stood up and said with a sigh. Thanks a lot, I will try my best to persuade Tony. Uchiha Madara smiled at Roddy, and then sent Roddy away. Although this is what O5 said, Uchiha Madara also felt a headache about how to persuade Tony. With such a character as Tony's sentence, he is obviously not a person who listens to persuasion. The days passed without any surprise, and Tony looked very normal. It's just that he is often in a daze in the position, and it can be seen that Tony's heart is actually not calm. I don't know what kind of thinking came out of it, maybe to fight for that breath, Tony held a more grand birthday party on his birthday. Although in Uchiha Madara's view, it was a completely meaningless move, but Tony insisted very much, and Uchiha Madara did not refute it. Before the birthday party officially started, Tony stood in front of the mirror and looked at his chest, basically covered by black veins, with a very serious expression. If I were you, I would never waste time hosting a birthday party. Uchiha Madara said helplessly. Advertisement. Obviously Tony's mood is not very good, and even some are unwilling to leave, it seems that he did not hear Uchiha Madara's words clearly. Seeing Tony's sluggish look, Uchiha Madara poured a glass of wine and placed it in front of Tony, reached out and patted Tony's shoulder. What's the matter? Did something happen? Tony asked Uchiha Madara with a bewildered look on his face after regaining his senses. What's going on? I see what happened to you so lost. Uchiha Madara said helplessly. It's nothing, I just thought of something. Tony didn't answer this question directly, but passed by vaguely. Uchiha Madara didn't force Tony, but just stared at Tony very seriously. Under the gaze of Uchiha's eyes, Tony couldn't hold it anymore, he could only sigh helplessly. I was thinking about a question, what would you do if you only had the last few days left? Tony asked curiously. Although I wanted to tell Tony that this was impossible, Uchiha Madara didn't say such a murderous thing, and thought about it seriously. Probably do what you want to do with someone you like, Uchiha Madara replied earnestly. In fact, Uchiha Madara also knew why Tony asked such a question. After all, Tony felt that the palladium poisoning could not be solved. Therefore, Tony felt that he was probably running out of time to ask such a question. To be honest, this answer was also said by Uchiha Madara after much deliberation. Regardless of the final outcome, Uchiha Madara wants Tony to do what he wants to do. Iron Man was never tasked with protecting the world, it was nothing more than the shackles others imposed on Tony. After listening to Uchiha Madara's words, Tony also had a thoughtful expression. But before she had time to ponder, Natalie came over to urge Tony to start the night party outside. As the protagonist of the banquet, Tony couldn't be absent. Advertisement. Think about what you want, but now you should go out and show your face. 39 Uchiha Madara patted Tony on the shoulder and pushed Tony out. This is a birthday party held on his own site. Although Uchiha Madara knows that Tony is unreliable now, he doesn't think there will be any big problems. But it turned out that Uchiha Madara was really relieved too early. Before it was equal to the rest of the live broadcast class, Pepper walked to the room where Uchiha Madara was resting with a look of anger. I think you'd better go outside and have a look, I can't control the situation now. Pepper said to Uchiha Madara, frowning. It was obvious that Tony had done something shocking again. Uchiha Madara sighed helplessly, but went out to check the situation. Tony is just crazy, playing discs on stage in his steel suit. But I don't know if he was drunk or for some reason, Tony didn't stabilize his body at all, and just fell on the stage. Immediately after that, Tony picked up the mic wind and started to give his speech, but in Tony's current state of insanity, it is obviously not good to say 543 words. And at this time, Colonel Roddy also walked in and stared at what was happening in front of him. What happened? Is he crazy? Roddy said angrily. I just vouched for him in front of everyone, and he's giving me this one now, and I think I'm still going to have to make a phone call. Obviously, Roddy is already a little angry. To be honest, Uchiha Madara was very angry when he saw this scene. However, Uchiha Madara was at least awake, knowing that this matter could not be escalated, and it would be difficult to end it once it became too big, so Uchiha Madara still reached out to stop Roddy. You can't call. Leave this matter to me, let me handle it, and I will stop him. Uchiha Madara said, suppressing her anger. Roddy still gave Uchiha Madara's face, so he waved at Uchiha Madara and didn't mention the matter of making a phone call. After comforting Roddy, Uchiha Madara rushed directly to the platform in front, and then took the mic wind in Tony's hand. Because he didn't want to waste his time, after a few simple words, Uchiha Madara directly announced that the banquet was over. Although the people below made a very regrettable voice, those who can come to this banquet are not fools. Chapter 291. Advertisement. Chapter 291. Knowing that Uchiha Madara is now in charge of the entire group, these people did not dare to offend Uchiha Madara, and the lively hall soon became quiet. After everyone was quiet, Uchiha Madara looked at Tony seriously. It's getting late, Tony, it's time for them to go back, and the banquet should be over. Uchiha Madara said very seriously. But obviously Tony hasn't woken up yet. Wen Yan just looked at Uchiha Madara with a smile and said, but I think the banquet has just begun. Because you're drunk and you feel something is wrong, listen to me and let them go back, Uchiha Madara explained. After hearing Uchiha Madara's words, Tony just looked at Uchiha Madara with very serious eyes, and after watching for a long time, Tony nodded towards Uchiha Madara. Then Tony took the microphone in Uchiha's wrench. Uchiha Madara thought that Tony was going to make a parting speech. But he didn't expect that while talking, Tony inadvertently fired the energy beam in his hand, and shattered the glass door next to him. The glass door was shattered and there was a big movement, and the people below were startled. But soon they thought it was a deliberate move by Tony, and everyone laughed, and then the atmosphere below suddenly became warm. Tony was already drunk, and once again this atmosphere made him forget everything that Uchiha Madara said before. Then Tony started giggling again, and also announced that a new round of banquets would start in 15 minutes. Seeing Tony who was almost drunk now, Uchiha Madara couldn't help frowning. The people below seemed to have forgotten Uchiha Madara's stern warning and started smashing wine bottles one by one. And throw things like wine bottles and fruits in the air, and let Tony use the energy beam to smash these things. To be honest, Uchiha Madara almost wanted to strangle Tony when he saw the scene that was as noisy as a wet market. But before Uchiha Madara could put his inner thoughts into action, a man in a steel suit suddenly appeared behind everyone. Advertisement. Get all of you out of here now. You could tell from the voice that it was Colonel Roddy who didn't know when to put on the steel battle suit. After seeing Roddy's appearance, the crowd who were still joking for a second was silent for a second, and then they rushed towards the door one by one. After everyone left, Tony still looked at Roddy nonchalantly. Even in the mood to let the DJ play a more cheerful song, Tony said that he would make a good plan with Roddy. Although Roddy put on this steel suit, Uchiha Madara didn't want to take care of it, and Tony really needed a lesson to wake up. And Tony regards the steel battle suit as more important than his own life, so without Tony's permission, other people can't wear the steel battle suit at all. Since Roddy was able to enter the laboratory and put on such a suit, it showed that Tony had already made a decision in his heart, and Uchiha Madara had no need to be that villain at all. Colonel Roddy would not have done such a thing if it hadn't been for Tony to have gone too far, and he has no opinion on Uchiha Madara Roddy's. Therefore, Roddy did not want to involve Uchiha Madara, but just fought with Tony. Because he wanted to wake Tony up, Uchiha Madara didn't have any intention of stopping him. Instead, he found a more comfortable position and watched everything that happened calmly. Seeing Tony's stubborn appearance, Roddy was very angry and kept asking Tony. What do you think you have the right to wear this dress now? Take it off for me. Roddy's voice was full of anger. But Tony obviously didn't take Roddy's words to heart. After all, for Tony, this shirt was made by himself. All in all, the current Roddy and Tony are simply not speculative, and the two of them don't like each other very well. Both of them were wearing steel battle suits, and when they fought, it would be devastating, basically destroying the Malibu villa. Probably because he was drunk, Tony's combat effectiveness was greatly reduced now, and he was knocked to the ground by Roddy with a punch. But even at this time, the two of them are still unwilling to admit defeat to each other. Advertisement. In the end, both of them were unwilling to let go, so they could only spread their palms and aim the energy beams at each other. To be honest, Uchiha Madara didn't care about the small trouble before, but if the two people are serious, this is what Uchiha Madara doesn't want to see. So when the two were fighting against each other, Uchiha Madara stretched out his hand and launched a small beam of energy, which directly interrupted the fight between the two. Enough trouble. This farce should end there. Uchiha Madara said with a cold face. Although I don't know the real strength of Uchiha Madara, Roddy has a feeling of long restraint in front of Uchiha Madara. Now that Uchiha Madara spoke up, Roddy withdrew his hand, not to mention Tony. After solving the cannibalism of the two people, Uchiha Madara looked at the villa that was already a mess with a look of disgust. Go back first, leave it to me to solve it here. Uchiha Madara said to Roddy in a bad tone. Knowing that Uchiha Madara was in a bad mood right now, Roddy didn't say much, and quickly left in a steel suit. Seeing the back of Roddy leaving, Tony was obviously a little unhappy. Why did he leave? He was the one who provoked me, how is Lee first? Tony muttered. But Uchiha Madara didn't want to reason with the drunk at all, and didn't answer Tony's words. He just filled a glass of ice water and poured it on Tony's face. Are you awake now, Tony? Do you know what you're doing? Uchiha Madara said with some hatred. Although Tony looked drunk, Uchiha Madara knew that Tony knew very well what was happening now. It turned out that Uchiha Madara's conjecture was also correct. After hearing Uchiha Madara's question, Tony's face showed a wry smile. This smile has already explained everything. Uchiha Madara looked at Tony and sighed helplessly. I hope you won't regret what you did today. Uchiha Madara looked at Tony and said seriously. After saying this, Uchiha Madara ignored Tony and left this messy place. Chapter 292 Undercover. Advertisement. Chapter 292 Undercover. The fighting inside had ceased, but the people gathered in the outside hall did not know what was going on inside. Seeing Uchiha Madara suddenly open the door and come out, these people were startled and screamed. Originally, Uchiha Madara was in a very bad mood, but now hearing this sharp and harsh voice, it was even more unpleasant. So Uchiha Madara glanced indifferently at the people gathered in the hall, and threatened, What are you waiting for? Let me take you out in person. It was obvious that Uchiha Madara's eyes were full of threats, and these people did not dare to pluck the hair on the tiger's head. So he immediately moved very neatly and ran out to the main entrance of the Malibu villa. To be honest, these people's movements are really too messy. In fact, the whole scene is noisy. Uchiha Madara frowns watching it all. Pepper also did not know when he appeared here, and after seeing this scene, he greeted him with some concern. What happened to Tony? What happened? Why did he suddenly act? Pepper asked urgently. There are so many questions. Uchiha 543 Madara didn't know how to answer, so he simply nodded. It's no big deal, it's just that the two of them suddenly went crazy. Uchiha said with a slightly indifferent expression. To be honest, Uchiha Madara has said it for this sake, but Pepper doesn't know how to answer it. At this time, Natalie also came over and asked about Tony's situation with some worry. But after seeing Natalie, Pepper's emotions suddenly got out of control. Pepper, who has always been very gentle, looked at Natalie with disgust. Don't ask me about Tony, since you showed up. Pepper's tone was full of impatience. To be honest, Uchiha Madara also thinks that Natalie's appearance is too coincidental, but now is not the time to tear her face. Advertisement. Uchiha Madara smiled at Natalie, then stopped Pepper from what he hadn't quite said yet. Okay Pepper, we all regret what happened today, but the important thing now is to stay calm, Uchiha Madara advised. Pepper is still very much about Uchiha Madara's words. After hearing that Uchiha Madara spoke up, Pepper finally said nothing more. After solving Pepper, Uchiha Madara smiled at Natalie perfunctorily, and then went to solve his own affairs. But Pepper's move gave Uchiha Madara some ideas, because he was too busy with other things before. So although Uchiha Madara still has doubts about Natalie, Uchiha Madara doesn't have time to keep an eye on Natalie. And now in Tony's situation, if Natalie really has other goals, she will definitely reveal her fault during this time. Now is the perfect time for Uchiha Madara to figure out who Natalie is. And to be honest, I didn't have time to think about it before, but when I calm down and think about it, Uchiha Madara can almost guess Natalie's identity. After all, Natalie's speech and behavior are not like ordinary people. After careful research, you can find that Natalie's skills are definitely specially trained. Combined with the calluses on Natalie's hands, Uchiha Madara can basically determine that Natalie should be an agent. Although there are many people who are unhappy with Tony. But to be honest, it's not that Uchiha Madara looks down on those people, but because of the ability of those people, he really doesn't have the ability to put an agent on Tony's side. Therefore, the candidates who may make this happen have already surfaced. After he had a conjecture in his heart, Uchiha Madara naturally wanted to verify his conjecture. After the Malibu Haishu affairs AFBB were almost settled, Uchiha Madara went directly to Fury. As the director of S.H.I.E.L.D., Fury's office is also heavily guarded. Advertisement. But with Uchiha Madara's strength, some guards couldn't stop Uchiha Madara at all, so Uchiha Madara easily arrived at Fury's office. After seeing Uchiha Madara appear, Fury showed a very bright smile, as if nothing had happened, and greeted Uchiha Madara very warmly. But Uchiha Madara didn't give Fury face at all, gave Fury a cold look, and then found a comfortable seat and sat down. Akito doesn't speak secretly, Natalie is yours. Although it was a question, Uchiha Madara's tone was very affirmative. Now that they have been discovered by Uchiha Madara, Fury no longer pretended to be crazy and foolish, but instead showed an admiring expression to Uchiha Madara. I haven't seen you for so many years, but you are still as smart as ever. That's right, he is the one I arranged for the past. Fury's tone was even slightly proud. Seeing Fury admit it, Uchiha Madara sneered and didn't speak, just locked Fury with his own eyes. Anyway, it has been discovered, and Frey simply told Natalie's identity. After all, there is no need to hide. Natalie's real name is Romanov Natasha, an excellent agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. 33 Fury said succinctly. Then Fury focused on talking about the main reason why he let Natalie go to Stark Group to go undercover. It's not that I have to do this, I just heard that Tony has some problems with his body, so I want to find out the reason. Fury said it very sincerely. To be honest, Uchiha Madara would have done the same thing if he was in Fury's position. But after all, Uchiha Madara's interests are now inconsistent with Fury's, so when Fury used the means on himself, it made Uchiha Madara particularly disgusted. Although he was not very happy inside, Uchiha Madara remained calm on the surface. You know, I hate others to be smart and play tricks in front of me. Because he was in a bad mood, Uchiha Madara's tone was very cold. Fury is not a fool and has been with Uchiha Madara before, and understands that Uchiha Madara is very impatient now. It's better to tell me the real reason, after all, he's sick, can't you save him? Uchiha Madara gave the ultimatum very impatiently. Facing the current situation, Fury is not a fool, and understands that if he cannot satisfy Uchiha Madara, the consequences are not something he can bear. Chapter 293 Decoy. Advertisement. Chapter 293 Decoy. Fury has always been very winking, so in the face of this situation, he chose to tell the truth without saying a word. I'm not a doctor, and even the tightest doctors can't do anything about palladium poisoning, but I do have one thing to offer, said 35 Fury. If it was normal, Uchiha Madara would probably cooperate with Furui, but today too many bad things happened. So Uchiha Madara didn't want to cooperate with Fury at all, and just urged Fury very impatiently. Just say something, don't waste each other's time. Uchiha Madara frowned and urged impatiently. Faced with Uchiha Madara who did not cooperate with him, Fury had no choice but to compromise. I don't have a cure for palladium poisoning completely, but there is an element that should be able to replace palladium, Fury said, looking at Uchiha Madara with a smile. But for Fury's statement, to be honest, and Zebo Madara do not really believe it. Because in order to find an element that can replace palladium, Uchiha Madara and Tony tried all the elements that exist in the world, but did not find a suitable element. So Uchiha Madara couldn't help but say, this is impossible, Tony and I have tried everything that exists in the world. It seems that Uchiha Madara's distrust has long been expected, and Fury is not angry, but shows a confident smile. Unfortunately, I want to tell you that you haven't tried all the elements. Fury's tone is full of pride. Hearing this, Uchiha Madara looked up into Fury's eyes. It can be seen that Fury is not lying, and his eyes are not hesitant at all, but are facing Uchiha Madara directly. It's a brand new element that no one else knows about but me, Fury explained. Now that everything has been said for this sake, Uchiha Madara naturally understands what Fury means, and will not go around in circles. Tell me, what do you want? I won't join SHIELD, even for Tony. Uchiha Madara leaned back on the chair and said calmly. Advertisement. Facing Uchiha Madara's straightforward words, Fury couldn't help laughing and said, sure enough, your personality hasn't changed at all over the years. When you are always at the highest point, no one dares to ask you to change. Uchiha Madara replied calmly. Facing Uchiha Madara's implied words, Fury just smiled and didn't say much. Of course I will not threaten you with this matter, but I hope to meet Tony, and I will persuade him myself. 35 Fury said very directly. It wasn't a difficult thing to do, so Uchiha Madara readily agreed. Tomorrow at noon, the palladium element has spread faster and faster, I don't want to waste time. Uchiha Madara said to Fury. Fury naturally also hoped to see Tony as soon as possible, and wished to be able to execute his plan immediately, so naturally he responded without saying a word. Now that a consensus has been reached, Uchiha Madara no longer wastes time and is ready to go back and tell Tony about it. But before Uchiha Madara left, Natasha walked in with a smile on her face. Although her identity has been exposed, Natasha behaved very calmly and greeted Uchiha Madara calmly after seeing Uchiha Madara. To be honest, they just had their own plans. Uchiha Madara didn't plan to really care about Natasha, and nodded at Natasha with a calm expression. Then Uchiha Madara saw that Natasha handed a black box to her. After taking the box, Uchiha Madara asked curiously, what is quite heavy, isn't it used to buy my stuff? For Uchiha Madara's joke, Natasha and Fury also smiled very cooperatively. Not to buy you, but to buy Mr. Stark. Fury replied with a smile. This is something we have newly developed. After injecting Mr. Stark, it can relieve his pain. Natasha smiled, and then said the effect of this thing. If it was something else, Uchiha Madara definitely wouldn't want it, but since it was a drug, Uchiha Madara didn't refuse it, and quickly left with this thing. By the time Uchiha Madara returned to the villa, it was already very late. Advertisement. 0. For flowers. Uchiha Madara also hoped to give Tony a time to let Tony calm down, so instead of going to Tony immediately, he went back to his room to rest. After waking up the next day, Uchiha Madara went to Tony refreshed after breakfast. But compared to Uchiha Madara's radiant face, Tony really had a bad time during this period of time, sitting on the balcony with a decadent look, looking out at the wide and magnificent sea. Hearing Uchiha Madara's footsteps, Tony didn't have any particular reaction. It was not until Uchiha Madara took out the syringe, and the needle went directly to Tony's neck, Tony just woke up from a big dream and looked at Uchiha Madara in surprise. What? Murder? Tony shouted in a deliberately very grandiose tone. Okay, don't pretend, it's just something that can make you more comfortable. Uchiha Madara looked at Tony with disgust and said. Sure enough, after the injection of the drug provided by Fury, Tony's frown gradually loosened. Uchiha Madara grabbed Tony's arm, rolled up Tony's sleeve, and found that the arm that had been covered with black veins had returned to its normal appearance. Seeing this scene, Tony couldn't help widening his eyes, and asked in surprise, what is this? The effect is much better than chlorophyll. Isn't it a good thing? Maybe you need to sell yourself to repay. Uchiha Madara said angrily. But the words were confusing, and Tony didn't understand what happened for a while. But seeing that he seemed to have hope of healing, Tony also sat up straight and looked at Uchiha Madara seriously. It was given to me by Fury, the director of SHIELD, but it's not a complete cure for palladium poisoning, it's a relief at most, explains Uchiha Madara. When he heard that there was no complete cure, Tony's eyes flashed a trace of loss, but he quickly regained his spirits. Why did he give this thing? I don't believe it if he said it was for charity. At this time, Tony gradually regained his senses and said with certainty. Didn't you say it? Probably you have to sell yourself to pay it back. Uchiha Madara joked. Chapter 294 Meeting. Advertisement. Chapter 294 Meeting. Selling oneself. This thing can't cure me completely. Am I so worthless? Tony asked with a hippie smile. Facing Tony, who started to smile when he regained his strength, Uchiha Madara rolled his eyes angrily. But now the time is approaching the agreed time between Uchiha Madara and Fury, so Uchiha Madara will stop talking nonsense. Uchiha Madara directly told all the bait that Fury threw out yesterday, and it was Tony's own business whether he was on the bait. All in all, the decision is up to you, but Fury does have a new element in his hands that can replace the palladium energy plate. Uchiha Madara finally made a conclusion. There is no doubt that the bait that Fury threw has a fatal attraction to Tony, but this is not a decision that can be made in a few words. 547. Tony was still lost in thought. After thinking for a while, Tony finally figured it out, and looked at Uchiha Madara with a firm face. Anyway, I'm still going to give it a try. Iron Man can't just die like this, Tony said with a very certain tone. Uchiha Madara was not surprised by Tony's choice, just nodded calmly. Then go and pack yourself up now, I have an appointment with Fury to meet at 12 o'clock. Uchiha Madara said in a flat tone, then turned and left Tony's room. After Tony came out, Uchiha Madara took Tony directly to the place agreed with Fury. This was a serious and very important meeting, so there were already vigilant people standing around, and there was a row of people with binoculars watching the wind and grass around them all the time. After Uchiha Madara sat down with Tony, she saw Natasha calmly brought 3 cups of coffee and placed them on the table in front. Tony didn't say anything when he saw Natasha appear, but he still glanced at Uchiha Madara with a puzzled expression. Isn't this what I want to meet? The two of them are a team, Uchiha Madara said casually. Tony was a little shocked by this news, but Natasha acted very calm, smiled at Tony, and then turned and left. Advertisement. After Natasha left, Uchiha Madara snapped his fingers in Tony's ear, and when Tony recovered, Uchiha Madara signaled that Fury could go straight to the topic. The Tonys have arrived, so Fury stopped pretending to be a ghost, and bluntly stated what he had in his hands. According to Fury, this new element was discovered by Howard. Howard called it a revolution in energy, thinking it was more powerful than nuclear reactors. After Fury finished speaking, Uchiha Madara took a sip of coffee before asking casually, is it Howard's discovery? Or is Anton Vanko involved? This question can be asked to hit the nail on the head, but since Fury is the director of S.H.I.E.L.D., it is estimated that Tony's every move is already clear. So it is not surprising that Anton Vanki came out of Uchiha Madara's mouth. Shandong Vanki naturally also participated, but the two people's positions are completely different. Furui said calmly. Uchiha Madara and Tony both made a gesture of listening attentively, and Fury didn't hide it and told everything he knew. Fank was seen as a good thing to make money, and Howard noticed it, so Howard drove him away. Fury said succinctly. This is only related to Anton Vanki's previous life, but Uchiha Madara is very curious why Anton Vanki was exiled. That's why he was exiled to a land of bitter cold. After returning to the country, he should also be sought after. Uchiha Madara asked curiously. Because after returning, the authorities found that he didn't know anything about this thing at all, and those who didn't work were naturally exiled. 35. According to Fury's account, in the following time, Fank lived a life of alcoholism every day, and such an environment was not conducive to the growth of children. Therefore, it is not surprising that Ivan has become such a temperament. And in Anton Vanki's description, Howard was the one who stole his research results. Immersive, Ivan naturally regarded the entire Stark family as his villains. Unexpectedly, the truth back then turned out to be like this, Uchiha Madara shrugged helplessly. Advertisement. To be honest, this kind of person who has no ability and has to attribute his failure to others is the kind of person Uchiha Madara hates the most. Anyway, Anton Vanki was already dead, and Ivan was in prison, so it was not interesting to continue to study the father and son, and Uchiha Madara quickly changed the subject. Tell me something useful, where are the new elements? Uchiha Madara asked very directly. After hearing this, Tony also raised his head and looked at Fury with burning eyes. Under the gaze of the two people, a slight smile appeared on Fury's face. He said that only you have the ability and ambition to complete his unfinished business. Fury stared into the distance and said in a flat tone. What did he say? Tony raised his eyebrows and asked with a calm face. He said it, but is he talking about you? Because if it were you, you should be able to solve your current problem. 33 Fury leaned in front of Tony and said. Hearing Fury's words, Tony suddenly fell silent, and then looked at Fury with very complicated eyes. I don't think you know very well, my relationship with him is not particularly good, it's all too sudden. Tony said in a very complicated tone. How much do you know about Howard? Fury asked rhetorically. For Tony, this question may be the most difficult question in the world to answer, and Tony couldn't help being silent for a long time. I don't know. You may not know that I don't have a good relationship with him, and 1.1 doesn't meet very often. Tony took a sip of coffee first, and then said a little embarrassedly. Fury didn't seem to be surprised by this answer, and nodded towards Tony calmly. What you said may have happened, but there should be some misunderstandings. Fury said with a certain look. But Tony didn't really agree with Fury's words, frowning and saying, it seems you know him better than I do. 35. These remarks revealed a sour feeling inexplicably, but Fury smiled calmly as if he didn't notice it. It can be said that he is also one of the founders of S.H.I.E.L.D. Fury said to Tony. After speaking, Fury made a gesture, and immediately behind him, 2 men in black came out carrying a large box. Chapter 295 Legacy. Advertisement. Chapter 295 Legacy. Under Fury's suggestion, the 2 men in black placed the big box in front of Uchiha Madara and the others. This move is really inexplicable, Tony looked at Fury with a puzzled look. But Fury didn't open his mouth to explain, instead he glanced down at his watch, and then suddenly stood up from the chair. I have a meeting at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and this thing will be handed over to you. Fury glanced at Uchiha Madara and Tony said calmly. However, in Tony's view, Fury's move is too inexplicable. And Tony agreed to meet because he hoped to get a new element to replace the palladium energy plate. After all, if they can live, no one wants to die like this, but I didn't think that Fury would say anything serious, and the slapstick operation continued. Seeing Fury's move, Tony couldn't help but stand up and looked at Fury in a panic. What's the situation now? What are you going to do? Tony's tone was full of confusion and doubts. Fury was very calm, and said calmly, I still have something to leave first, I believe you can handle it. Fix 05, I don't even know what you are talking about. Tony looked at Fury with some speechlessness. However, he left very quickly. After standing up, he immediately put on his jacket and no longer wanted to communicate with Tony. By the way, Natasha will continue to stay in the Stark group to perform undercover tasks. Before leaving, Fury glanced at Uchiha Madara and said. Uchiha Madara also understood what Fury meant and hoped that he would not shoot at Natasha. Although Natasha was an undercover agent, for the sake of Fury's contribution of new elements, Uchiha Madara still gave Fury a face and nodded towards Fury. After obtaining the consent of Uchiha Madara, Fury was also relieved, and the expression on his face gradually relaxed. Remember Tony, I've been watching you all the time. After taking a few steps, Fury turned his head and said to Tony meanly. Advertisement. After saying this, Fury finally left completely. But when Fury left, he not only left Natasha, but also Coulson. Coulson was an acquaintance, and Uchiha Madara didn't say much. After looking at the surrounding situation, a smile appeared on Natasha's face, and then she arranged the next thing. It's time for you to go back to your place now, we will cut off all the signals, good luck. Natasha said calmly. Hearing this, Tony glanced at Natasha in disbelief, and then put his eyes on Uchiha Madara. But Uchiha Madara thinks this is a good opportunity for Tony to calm down and study. Although he has always been very unruly towards you, the fishing reels outside really disturbed Tony's mood during this time. And put a lot of pressure on Tony. Uchiha Madara hopes that Tony cannot waste his attention on these indifferent things. So facing Tony's gaze, Uchiha Madara just shrugged indifferently. It's useless to look at me, I'm not their chief, my words don't work for them. Uchiha Madara said indifferently. Then Uchiha Madara took a few steps forward, picked up the box very easily with one hand, and threw it directly into Tony's arms. There was no preparation for a while, and after taking the box, Tony couldn't stand still and almost fell. But fortunately, he managed to stabilize his figure in the end, so he didn't lose face in front of others. What are you still doing? Hurry up and study this new element, I thought you would want to live longer. Uchiha Madara glanced at Tony and said. After saying this, Uchiha Madara took the lead to go outside. Tony woke up at this time and quickly followed Uchiha Madara's pace. After waiting for the laboratory, Tony looked at the box he got from Fury in silence, with a very complicated expression. What's the matter? Are you timid? Do you need me to open it for you? Uchiha Madara joked. How is that possible? How could I be such a person? Tony said very stubbornly, and then opened the box very quickly. Advertisement. There are a lot of things in it. Uchiha Madara first opened a drawing, took a look at it, and then put his eyes on other things. The noodles were very messy. Uchiha Madara also saw a DVD and took it out for Jarvis to play. Soon Howard's face appeared on the screen, and Tony listened to Howard's speech while looking at the notes in the box. Tony's feelings for Howard are very complicated, so after seeing Howard's images, Tony became extremely irritable. Perhaps Howard is not a qualified father, but he is indeed a very good friend, so Uchiha Madara watched this film with great interest. Tony had already wanted to close the film, but suddenly Howard in the video suddenly called Tony's name. Howard, who has always been very strict with Tony, suddenly became unusually warm, saying that this film was specially reserved for Tony. I hope Tony can study things that he is not limited by the times and cannot study. 547 When the film was about to end, a smile suddenly appeared on Howard's face. My greatest creation now and in the future has always been you, Tony. Another sentence obviously gave Tony a great shock. Tony opened his eyes slightly and stared at the screen intently, his expression full of disbelief. Okay, our greatest creation, now you can always cheer up. Uchiha Madara patted Tony on the shoulder and said with a smile. In any case, this film has indeed brought Tony a great inspiration, and Tony, who has always been decadent, has finally regained his strength. I hope you can research this thing as soon as possible. To be honest, I am really fed up with these messes. Uchiha Madara couldn't help urging. Hearing Uchiha Madara's complaint, Tony just wanted to refute, but before Tony could speak, Natasha appeared at the door and knocked on the door. After seeing Natasha, Uchiha Madara smiled at Tony and said, "Work hard and don't let me down." After saying this, Uchiha Madara ignored Tony's hesitant expression and walked directly to the door. Although her identity has been exposed, Natasha is worthy of being an experienced agent, and she is as calm as ever in front of Uchiha Madara. Chapter 296 Tony Shows Love. Advertisement. Chapter 296 Tony Shows Love. This is not an important matter, but Uchiha Madara is now the CEO of Stark Group. It is inevitable that others will be surprised. So many people have secretly asked Pepper about Uchiha Madara's current situation, thinking that it's okay for Tony to study new elements in the villa. So after hearing the news from Natasha, Uchiha Madara left the villa without hesitation and returned to the Stark Group. To be honest, after returning to the group, Uchiha Madara basically had no free time. Whether it was Uchiha Madara's own phone or the office phone, he basically never stopped. And those so-called politicians and celebrities are holding on to Tony's decadence a while ago and writing articles wantonly. And said that Tony Stark is dead, because when the world was in danger, Iron Man did not come out to protect everyone. There are even many people who are quite critical of Uchiha Madara as the CEO of Starkey Group. After all, in the eyes of these people, Uchiha Madara simply did not know that it came out of it. Suddenly Daquan was shaking hands with such a piece of fat, and the others were naturally drooling. Looking at the ugly faces of the so-called anchor politicians on TV, Uchiha Madara sneered, but she was used to these rumors and didn't particularly care. At this time, someone just bumped into the muzzle of the gun and called and said something unknown. Uchiha Madara was originally upset, but now he is not polite at all. Whatever you say, if you really have the ability, ask the president to sign a decree, or shut up. Uchiha Madara said indifferently. After speaking, Uchiha Madara ignored the yelling and hung up the phone very neatly. Just as Uchiha Madara was sitting in a chair and was angry, the door to the office was suddenly opened, and Tony walked in with a box of strawberries in his hand. Why are you here? Shouldn't you study your new elements with peace of mind? Uchiha Madara asked to ease his tone when he saw that it was Tony. Regarding Uchiha Madara's question, Tony, who has always been very generous, seems to be a little embarrassed, and he hesitated for a long time without saying why. Advertisement. Seeing Tony's strange behavior, Uchiha Madara looked at Tony with some doubts, not knowing what happened. In fact, before it was a little thing, didn't you say that you should cherish the time in front of you? No one knows what will happen in the next second, so. Tony said incoherently. So what? Uchiha Madara asked curiously when he rarely saw Tony like this. So I want to come and apologize to Pepper and have a chat with her by the way. Tony said while raising the strawberry he was holding in his hand. I didn't expect a very awkward Tony to be able to think about it now, and Uchiha Madara was also a little surprised. But it's only a small thing, so Uchiha Madara naturally won't stop Tony. With so many years of experience in Uchiha Madara, it can be seen that sometimes the atmosphere between Tony and Pepper does have some weirdness. However, for Tony, it may be a good thing if there is someone who understands and supports him and is always by his side. So Uchiha Madara smiled at Tony knowingly, and then motioned for Tony to go directly to Pepper. But Tony gave Uchiha Madara an embarrassed smile and said, but now Pepper doesn't seem to want to see me. I can't even get into her office. 5. After hearing Tony's words, Uchiha Madara couldn't help laughing. No wonder Tony came to his office, it turned out to be blocked outside. But Uchiha Madara also rarely saw Tony's jokes, so he didn't care about these details, and made a gesture of wrapping his hands towards Tony. Uchiha Madara became the CEO of the group, and a hardworking old employee like Pepper was naturally not treated badly and became the vice president. Therefore, there is naturally a secretary-manager outside Pepper's office. Tony has left the Stark group now, and what he said is naturally not very useful. But Uchiha Madara called and talked to the secretary outside. Naturally, the secretary did not dare to offend Uchiha Madara. After getting the help of Uchiha Madara, Tony had a very bright smile on his face, and couldn't wait to find Pepper. Advertisement. Seeing Tony go out with a box of strawberries in high spirits, Uchiha Madara stopped Tony in surprise. Is this strawberry for Pepper? Uchiha Madara's tone was full of surprise. But Tony thought that Uchiha Madara was unhappy, and he only prepared strawberries for Pepper, so he smiled at Uchiha Madara with some embarrassment. Seeing the embarrassed expression on Tony's face, Uchiha Madara knew that Tony must have misunderstood, and he didn't bother to talk about something with this two fools, so he told the question directly. Backquote. But don't you know that Pepper is allergic to strawberries? Uchiha Madara made no attempt to hide her curiosity. I didn't expect it to be such a reason. Tony's face froze after hearing this, and he looked at Uchiha Madara with some embarrassment. Sometimes it's never the gift that matters, it's whether you have the heart, and it seems you don't know enough about these things, said 35 Uchiha Madara meaningfully. After saying this, Uchiha Madara ignored Tony and just waved his hand, indicating that Tony can leave. After the office was quiet, Uchiha Madara looked up in the direction where Tony left, with a play-watching expression on his face. Uchiha Madara, who was in a bad mood at first, gradually showed a smile on his face when Tony made such a fuss. Li Ma Jiao, sure enough, the old saying is very correct, your own happiness is always based on the pain of others. But although I really want to go to the theater, Uchiha Madara is busy with business, and it can only make people pay attention to the situation on Tony's side. Sure enough, Uchiha Madara received the message before half an hour. Pepper left the office without hesitation, and Tony was invited out very politely. When it was rare to see Tony also deflated, Uchiha Madara laughed at Tony in his office. A few minutes later, Uchiha Madara saw Tony hurried into his office, his eyes filled with doubts. Seeing Tony, Uchiha Madara wanted to laugh again, but managed to control his emotions and looked at Tony with concern. What's wrong? You don't seem to be talking very pleasantly from your face. Uchiha Madara asked knowingly. Chapter 297 Major Discovery. Advertisement. After hearing Uchiha Madara's question, Tony's face showed an angry expression, but he managed to control his emotions in the end. I just don't understand what happened. Pepper suddenly has a very big opinion on me. Seeing Tony's unsure expression, Uchiha Madara secretly laughed at Tony's incomprehension in his heart. But on the surface, he didn't say anything, and he comforted Tony very patiently. You have to get used to it, after all she does all the work you should do, so it's understandable to complain a few words. Uchiha Madara said of course. After Uchiha Madara said this, Tony couldn't say anything else, he could only stare blankly at Uchiha Madara. There's nothing wrong with what Uchiha Madara said. Since Tony was about to come over and apologize to Pepper, he naturally understood it. It's just that Tony has always been very arrogant, and he doesn't want to show weakness in front of others, so he can't say soft words for a while. Even in front of Uchiha Madara, Tony didn't know how to continue the topic, so he quickly jumped the topic. What happened to that Natasha? Why is he still in the group now? Tony asked in a bad tone. It is estimated that he was angry in Pepper's office, so 547 wanted to put his anger on Natasha. However, Uchiha Madara is not used to Tony's problem, and he just raised his eyebrows when he heard the words, and did not stand on a united front with Tony. She doesn't have any problems at work, I can't just dismiss people for no reason. Uchiha Madara said indifferently. But, she is obviously with an undercover agent. She is in the group. What if the interests of our Stark group are harmed? Tony said with a frown. Of course I know she's an agent, but she shouldn't have any interest in the Stank group, after all, you're the key. Uchiha Madara said of course. Tony didn't know how to answer these words, and he could only reluctantly accept the fact. After complaining to Uchiha Madara, I didn't get the response I wanted, so Tony left angrily. Not long after Tony left, Uchiha Madara's office was knocked on again, and several employees walked in with a very hard time carrying a painting. This painting is the future science and technology park envisaged by Howard. Uchiha Madara was a little tired after working all day. AFBB went to the painting and looked at it. Advertisement. After seeing it, Uchiha Madara was about to leave, but when he turned to leave, Uchiha Madara left a small metal plaque on the edge of the painting with a line of words written on it. Uchiha Madara took a closer look and found that the words on the small sign were the key to the future. Combined with the information about Howard from Fury before, Uchiha Madara has a bold guess in his heart. After making conjectures, the more Uchiha Madara looked at the painting, he felt that it was not simple. He looked at the painting carefully and found a bright spot. After making new discoveries, Uchiha class is naturally unwilling to waste time in the office. Without further ado, he asked the staff to move the painting to his car, and Uchiha Madara took the painting back to the Malibu villa. Seeing that Uchiha Madara brought back such a large painting, Tony's face was full of doubts. However, after Uchiha Madara pointed to the words on the small sign, Tony's eyes lit up. To be honest, Tony has been studying what Howard left behind for so many days, and he should be more familiar with this painting, and immediately discovered the possibility. Soon Tony and Uchiha Madara moved the painting to the laboratory, and with Jarvis' help, the painting was projected. After the projection, through various model changes, the painting has completely changed. I think it's like an atom, Uchiha Madara said excitedly. Obviously, Tony is also holding the same idea as Uchiha Madara, staring at this projection screen intently. But today's atoms are not very standard. After some research, Uchiha Madara and Tony agreed to remove all the irrelevant things of the deer in the science park. And then through other model structures, finally a new thing was successfully synthesized. There was excitement in both Tony's and Uchiha Madara's eyes at the sight of a new type of element on the screen. I think he has been dead for so many years, and he is still teaching me new knowledge. Tony muttered to himself. Advertisement. From the moment I met, I knew Howard was a genius, and you still have a lot to learn. Uchiha Madara said to Tony earnestly. If it was the usual Tony, he would definitely be very dissatisfied with Howard's words. But after so many things, Tony finally grew up and nodded gratefully towards Uchiha Madara. Well, now is not the time to be excited, this should be a new energy that can replace palladium, can Jarvis extract this thing? Uchiha Madara asked. After Uchiha Madara's question, Jarvis answered immediately, but the news was not very good. Sorry, sir, this element doesn't seem to be able to be synthesized. Jarvis said with some regret. After getting such news, Uchiha Madara and Tony were not very disappointed, but full of energy. Okay, anyway, guys, it's time for us to get into operation mode. Uchiha Madara clapped his hands and said with some excitement. Tony doesn't feel tired at all right now, and immediately takes action after hearing Uchiha Madara's words. It is still very difficult for this laboratory to synthesize this new element. This lab needs to be remodeled before the action can take place. However, in order to synthesize this new element, there is always some effort required. Tony didn't feel bad about his current laboratory at all, and he didn't feel soft at all when he moved his hands. After the installation of various instruments, the current laboratory has completely changed, and the original shadow can hardly be seen. After the lab was refitted, Tony couldn't wait to conduct his own experiments. But to be honest, Uchiha Madara thinks that Tony needs a good rest more than an immediate experiment, and now Tony's dark circles are thick as if he was poisoned. Under Uchiha Madara's serious expression, Tony chose to compromise. However, it is estimated that Tony didn't sleep very well. Just before dawn the next day, Uchiha Madara heard a very loud movement. Chapter 298. Advertisement. This point is still in the villa, except for Uchiha Madara, there are only Tony and Coulson. But obviously Coulson would not make such a move, so the maker of this noise must be Tony. Uchiha turned around and ignored Tony, but fell asleep on his own. After waking up the next day, Uchiha Madara had a leisurely breakfast before walking to the laboratory downstairs to check the situation. The laboratory has been completely remodeled for a long time, and there are many strange devices in it, and Tony is conducting experiments in full swing. After seeing Uchiha Madara appear, Tony only had time to say hello to Uchiha Madara, and then worked hard again. It was rare to see Tony so energetic, and Uchiha Madara didn't bother, just took a look in the laboratory and found something he could do. While walking, Uchiha Madara suddenly saw a shield, this shield and the shield held in Captain America's hand, it was carved out of a mold. It's just that this shield in the hands of Uchiha Madara is an unfinished half-finished product. When Uchiha Madara was looking at the semi-finished product in his hand, there was a sudden sound of the combination lock being opened at the door, and then Coulson walked in. I heard you left the villa yesterday, Coulson said to Tony as soon as he came in. But Tony is now focusing all his attention on his experiments, and he just nodded casually when he heard the words. You talk to him now, and he basically ignores it all, like opening the shield. Uchiha Madara smiled and explained to Coulson. Okay, he looks good now, and the lab has been refitted very well. Coulson shrugged, looking at the surrounding devices in surprise. What's the matter with you coming here? Coulson had to go to the Three Treasures Palace without incident, so Uchiha Madara asked directly. I'm here to say goodbye to you, and I'm going to be transferred to another place, in New Mexico, Coulson explained. Secret mission. Uchiha Madara raised her eyebrows and asked curiously. Advertisement. Hearing this, Coulson didn't hesitate, and it wasn't something he couldn't say anyway, so he nodded. At this time, Tony suddenly raised his head and glanced at Uchiha Madara, and then pointed to the things in Uchiha Madara's hands excitedly. Do you want this shield? Uchiha Madara asked, handing over the shield in his hand. After getting the shield, Tony immersed himself in his world again and put the shield under a device. These are completely professionals who know how to operate, and Uchiha Madara and Coulson just looked at them curiously, and then completely lost interest. It seems that Coulson also knows the shield in his hand, and some are surprised. Isn't this a series with the captain's shield? You still know this thing? I thought you didn't know. Uchiha Madara replied with some surprise. After all, there is still a big gap between this shield and the shield in Steve's hand, but Uchiha Madara has been with Steve for a long time, so they can recognize it. After hearing Uchiha Madara's words, a shy smile appeared on Coulson's face. The captain is everyone's idol, and I admire the captain very much. Coulson's tone was full of yearning. Uchiha Madara didn't know what to say, so he could only reach out and pat Coulson's shoulder, expressing his approval of Coulson's eyes. After a few chats with Uchiha Madara, Coulson stopped wasting time and was ready to go now. Good luck then. Uchiha Madara smiled at Coulson, expressing her blessing. Coulson also smiled back at Uchiha Madara, but before leaving, Coulson glanced at Uchiha Madara with some embarrassment. Then, under the curious gaze of Uchiha Madara, Coulson asked awkwardly, can you give me a hug? This request was a bit abrupt. Uchiha Madara didn't respond for a while, and looked at Coulson with surprise. Under the gaze of Uchiha Madara, Coulson looked even more embarrassed, but he still pretended to be calm and stood there. I already know who you are, Coulson said in a very small voice. Advertisement. But this remark gave Uchiha Madara a very big shock, and Uchiha Madara looked at Coulson with some incredible. 0. For flowers. Facing the gaze of Uchiha Madara, Coulson didn't even think about telling lies, and directly told his discovery process. I didn't know it at first, but I learned your name from the director after I got used to it. This name is really rare. 33 Coulson explained. No matter how rare it is, there is always the possibility of repetition, and this is not enough of a reason for you to discover my identity. Uchiha Madara shook his head and said very calmly. Because I am your admirer, I have found a lot of relevant information. Although your photos are very few, I have the honor to see them. Coulson said a little embarrassedly. I didn't expect to meet a fan of my own under such circumstances. Uchiha Madara didn't know how to face this matter. Seeing that Uchiha Madara didn't speak for a long time, Coulson thought that he had angered Uchiha Madara, and quickly explained and assured Uchiha Madara. Don't worry, only I found out about this, and I definitely didn't tell anyone. Coulson looked Uchiha Madara straight in the eyes and said very sincerely. But Uchiha Madara is not worried about this matter. After all, Uchiha Madara also has the ability to protect herself, but she just lost her mind for a while. Facing Coulson's fearful expression, Uchiha Madara couldn't help but laugh. It's okay, I trust you, and it's not a big deal. Uchiha Madara waved his hand and said nonchalantly. After Uchiha Madara's reply, Coulson was also relieved. It seemed that Coulson should really admire himself and Steve very much. After speaking, the atmosphere between the two suddenly fell silent. If Coulson was just a pure shield agent, Uchiha Madara could still treat Coulson in a businesslike manner. But now that he knows Coulson's admiration for himself, Uchiha Madara doesn't know what to do. Coulson was unable to say a word for a long time because he was facing his idol, and finally Uchiha Madara was the first to break the silence. Aren't you going to leave soon? Will it be too late? Uchiha Madara was completely out of words, and asked B. Chapter 299 Creating New Elements. Advertisement. Uchiha Madara's voice woke Coulson, who had been in a daze, and looked at Uchiha Madara at a loss. That's right, it's almost time for me, and I'm leaving soon. Coulson's tone was full of panic, and the whole person looked different from the calm and self-controlled agent before. Hearing Coulson's words, Uchiha Madara nodded at Coulson with a smile, and then stood there ready to watch Coulson leave. Although he said he wanted to leave, Coulson's whole person's actions were slow and hesitant to glance at Uchiha Madara from time to time. Originally, Uchiha Madara didn't know what Coulson was thinking, but combined with what he said before, Uchiha Madara suddenly realized. Under Coulson's hesitant gaze, Uchiha Madara took a step forward with a smile, and then gave Coulson a hug. I wish you good luck, and I hope you can return safely. Uchiha Madara patted Coulson's shoulder and blessed with a smile. After getting the hug of the idol, Coulson was in a trance, and there was a slightly silly smile on his face. Then he smiled stupidly at Uchiha Madara, and finally left the underground laboratory. After Coulson left, Uchiha Madara turned his head and glanced at Tony, and found that Tony was still immersed in his experiment and had no sense of what was happening around him. Uchiha Madara smiled helplessly, but did not care about these trivial matters, but went to Tony's side to help. At this time, Tony has already equipped all the experimental equipment, and he only needs to start all of them. But after all of them were activated, the handle that controlled the energy beam kept shaking. Although Tony has a lot of muscles in his arms, he hasn't had a good rest and exercise during this time, so he can't accurately control the handle for a while. Seeing some struggling expressions on Tony's face, Uchiha Madara shook his head, then walked to Tony's side and took the handle directly. What needs to be done? Uchiha Madara ignored the startled Tony, and asked very directly. Now this time is obviously very important, and Tony can't be surprised, and quickly directs Uchiha Madara. Just control the energy beam and aim at the center of the circle. Tony said, pointing to the circular hoop not far in front. Advertisement. For Uchiha Madara, this is simply a simple action that cannot be simpler. After all, the guns have not been practiced in vain for so many years. So Uchiha Madara did this easily, aiming at the center of the circular hoop, and it emitted a very dazzling white light. This white glow lasted for a short while. After the white light went up, Uchiha Madara noticed that in the center of the circular hoop, a triangular object emitting a light blue light appeared. Is this a success? Uchiha Madara asked curiously, letting go of his grip on the handle. Tony didn't seem to hear Uchiha Madara's question, but just looked at the triangular thing with a burning gaze, and there was a strange light in his eyes. After Uchiha Madara reached out and pushed Tony, Tony woke up and kept sighing in admiration. God, this is just perfect, we made it. Tony's tone was full of pride and pride. Although Uchiha Madara's emotions are not as exposed as Tony's, but after hearing the good news, he couldn't help laughing. Congratulations gentlemen, you have created a brand new element. Jarvis's low and pleasant voice also came out. Hearing this, Uchiha Madara and Tony were even more happy, and soon walked to the circular hoop. Then Tony took out a small pair of tweezers and carefully took out the new triangular element. Although a new element has been successfully created, it is now necessary to try whether this new element can successfully replace the palladium element. So Uchiha Madara quickly calmed down and let Tony move on to the next experiment. While Uchiha Madara and Tony were busy, suddenly there was a strange call, and Tony didn't have time to respond. Is it Coulson? But Uchiha Madara answered the phone first and asked. However, it was not Coulson's voice that came over the phone, but a very deep and malicious voice, which was actually Ivan. Since it is Ivan, this matter has nothing to do with Uchiha Madara. Uchiha Madara raised his head and gestured to Tony. Advertisement. After hearing Tony's voice, Ivan let out a very weird laugh. Tony, I would also like to thank you, it is indeed much better after using the dual core. Ivan's voice was full of pride. After hearing Ivan's words, Tony frowned in disgust, and didn't want to pay attention to Ivan at all. But Ivan didn't need Tony's response at all, the reason why he made this call was to show off. In the face of such Ivan, Uchiha Madara and Tony didn't bother to respond at all, and threw the phone to a plate. Jarvis, can you locate where he is now? Uchiha Madara asked. Since Ivan is so fearless now, it means that Ivan must have escaped from the prison, otherwise it is impossible to be so leisurely. After hearing Uchiha Madara's request, Jarvis immediately began to inquire. The location is still very convenient now, and Jarvis soon found out that Ivan was actually on the east blue shore of his own country. Go ahead, we need more detailed positions. Uchiha Madara looked at the positioning on the screen and said to Jarvis. Just as Jarvis was inquiring about Ivan's location, Ivan's cruel words were almost at an end. What your Stark family has done to us, within 40 minutes, I will return 1.1 to you as much. Ivan said viciously. But now Tony doesn't bother to pay attention to Ivan at all, and when he hears it, he just returns calmly, really? Then I'll wait and see, it sounds good. After replying such a sentence, Tony ignored Ivan over there. At this time, Jarvis also made a very important discovery. He's near Manhattan right now, Jarvis said. Just when Uchiha Madara wanted Jarvis to continue his inquiries, the screen displayed the words, location failed. Looking at these dazzling red letters, the expressions on Uchiha Madara and Tony's faces were not very good. But Uzebo Madara still kept calm at all times, although the positioning failed, but now the scope has been shrunk very small. So Uchiha Madara asked Jarvis to mark all the surrounding buildings within this geographic area. Chapter 300 Hammer Fair. Advertisement. This is almost the most prosperous area in Manhattan, surrounded by many shops. But of all the shops listed, one company in particular caught the attention of Uchiha Madara and Tony, and Justin Hammer's company is actually here. After seeing the words of Justin Hammer, Uchiha Madara and Tony looked at each other with the same suspicion in their eyes. It can be seen from the hearing that Justin Hammer is an extremely insidious person who will do anything to achieve his goals. So if Justin Hammer got Ivan out of prison, and let Ivan study the double arc reactor, it seems not impossible. Since he dared to make this call, it means that Ivan's current research should be fruitful. What happened next is definitely not a good thing, after all, Ivan is a complete lunatic. And for Ivan it was a perfect time, because Uchiha Madara just remembered that there will be a hammer fair today. Countless high-level celebrities will gather at the Hammer Expo, and Ivan can slaughter revenge recklessly to satisfy his inner desire for revenge. Thinking of this, Uchiha Madara and Tony couldn't help but have worried expressions on their faces. Although Uchiha Madara and Tony were extremely calm when Ivan called before, it was just to not make Ivan feel proud. Recently, celebrities went to the Hammer Expo, and as Uchiha's deputy, Pepper, also took Natasha to the expo. Uchiha Madara and Tony may not care about the lives of others, but Natasha and Pepper are always their acquaintances. But now this new element has just been created and has not passed the final test. So Uchiha Madara is not at ease, and Tony uses this new element immediately. After taking a look at Tony, Uchiha Madara quickly made a decision and said, "You stay here to test new elements, and leave this to me." For Uchiha Madara, it's not a very difficult thing, and it's not a big deal other than revealing his identity. Advertisement. But Tony shook his head and rejected Uchiha Madara's proposal. One of the important factors is that Tony knows that Uchiha Madara doesn't want to get involved in those troublesome things, so he has been keeping his identity secret all the time. Tony also didn't want Uchiha Madara to appear in front of the world because of his own reasons. As for another very important factor is Ivan. After all, Uchiha Madara and Ivan have no deep hatred. Ivan has always been the target of Tony. No, I still have to come forward. Ivan's target is me. If I don't show up, he will never do it, Tony said with great certainty. Although I don't really want to admit it, what Tony said is indeed the truth. After a moment of thought, Uchiha Madara made a quick decision. After all, time waits for no one, and Tony is still such a character. If Uchiha Madara does not let Tony go in person, in case of any accident, Tony estimates that he will live in remorse and self-blame for the rest of his life. After thinking about it clearly, Uchiha Madara sighed helplessly, and then nodded towards Tony. But you must also pay attention to your senses. If you really can't stand it, contact me, Uchiha Madara said very seriously. Tony also knew that Uchiha Madara cared about himself, so he did not refuse, and nodded towards Uchiha Madara with a smile. After getting the approval of Uchiha Madara, Tony stopped wasting time and immediately let Jarvis equip himself with all the gear. Tony then nodded towards Uchiha Madara and rushed out in his steel suit. Although he is very confident in Tony's ability, but the new elements have not been professionally analyzed after all, Uchiha Madara is naturally impossible to stay in the villa with peace of mind. After watching Tony leave, Uchiha Madara also went out immediately, but Uchiha Madara can use teleportation, and the speed is much faster than Tony. Before Tony arrived at the Hammer Expo, Uchiha Madara was already inside watching Hammer perform. It can be seen that Hammer is really disgusted with Tony. Even if Tony doesn't appear at all now, Hammer does not forget to bring Tony in his words and deeds. To be precise, it was constantly pulling and stepping. After all, the order of the military was handed over to Hammer. Advertisement. Therefore, it seems understandable that Hammer sometimes does not recognize his own identity. After publishing some inexplicable insights, Hammer finally stepped into the topic, showing everyone the new research of the Hammer Group. But the mouth is talking about new research. In fact, anyone with a little brain can see that this is completely plagiarizing Tony's steel battle suit. Just adding some clumsy disguise, Hammer actually said that this was his new creation. When Hammer proudly declared that he had created such a steel warrior that could be used on the three fronts of sea, land and air, Uchiha Madara couldn't help sneering at the bottom of Genin. When Uchiha Madara looked at Hammer as a demon, Hammer suddenly said that someone would come to demonstrate the attack power of these steel warriors. It's a good coincidence that this person was chosen. Uchiha Madara was very familiar with 550, but it was Colonel Roddy. Hearing the name Uchiha Madara was surprised for a moment, but it was Tony's own choice no matter what, and Uchiha Madara had no right to interfere. So Uchiha Madara was only surprised for a second, and soon returned to normal. Just when the noise of the exposition was at its peak, a burst of light suddenly flashed outside the house. Perhaps to show off, the exposition is all glass, so you can see everything outside very clearly. After seeing the light outside, Uchiha Madara immediately knew that Tony had rushed over. Uchiha Madara breathed a sigh of relief after seeing that he had arrived as scheduled. Next, you only need to watch a good show. Tony should be able to handle such a little thing. I didn't expect Iron Man to appear here. Although the criticism of Iron Man was very loud during this time, ordinary people still admire Iron Man very much. Therefore, after seeing Tony's appearance, the expo suddenly remembered a warm welcome. In normal times, Tony would probably be happy for such cheers, but now is not the time to study these things. After the live class saw Tony and Roddy talking for a few words, they walked up to Hammer. Chapter 301 Ivan's Revenge. Advertisement. Where is he? Tony could use the communicator when communicating with Roddy, but he had no such connection with Tony and Tony asked directly. Hammer should be well aware of what Tony said about him, but Hammer's psychological endurance is very good. Hearing this question, a very innocent expression appeared on his face, an expression that was completely incomprehensible to what Tony was saying. What are you talking about? Where is he? Hammer said in a very calm tone. It has to be said that people are shameless and invincible. For a shameless person like Hammer, Tony can't pry open Hammer's mouth. So Tony glared at Hammer and didn't want to talk nonsense with Hammer anymore. At this moment, Roddy's panicked voice suddenly came from behind. Damn, what happened? Colonel Roddy's tone was full of bewilderment. After hearing the sound, Tony turned his head and glanced at it, and then found that he didn't know what was going on, and the weapon port of the steel battle suit Rhodey was wearing was aimed directly at Tony. There is something inexplicable about what happened. Although it was not very pleasant before, Tony believed that Rhodey didn't want to put himself to death. So Tony looked at Roddy with some doubts, and in the face of this situation, Roddy also had a hard time. I don't know, he is completely out of my control. Roddy's voice was also full of bewilderment. And it's not just that there was a problem with the steel suit on Roddy's body, all the weapons of the steel warriors in the row behind him were aimed at Tony. Faced with this situation, the manipulator behind the scenes is already obvious. After all, Hammer estimated that it was only by cooperating with Ivan that so many steel suits could be developed, so only Ivan could manipulate these steel suits. Once the program is activated, there is basically no possibility of going backwards, so if Tony continues to stay here, all other visitors to the entire exposition will suffer. And the audience below, faced with such a situation, is probably terrified. All of them sat on their seats with dull eyes, and no one was thinking of running away. Uchiha Madara was about to be d off. Advertisement. After looking around, Uchiha Madara ran directly to a staff member and snatched the mic wind in his hand. Why are you still standing there? You're not going to run away now, are you all going to stay here and wait to die? Uchiha Madara deliberately lowered her voice and shouted angrily. 0. After Uchiha Madara's voice came out, there were still some quiet auditoriums, like a drop of boiling water splashed into a frying pan. Everyone woke up, and some confusion rushed towards the door. Anyway, I have already accomplished the task of reminding me, so what to do next is up to these people. Uchiha Madara threw the mic wind in his hand very chicly, and then went to Natasha and Pepper. When everyone was crowding outside, Pepper and Natasha wanted to go inside instead, so they were very conspicuous. Uchiha Madara easily found the position of the two people, then ran over, and supported Pepper who was about to fall. After seeing Uchiha Madara appear, Pepper was obviously very excited, and the whole person was relieved. But now is not the time to talk about these. Uchiha Madara directly took Pepper and Natasha down and walked to Hammer's control room. Because there is no direct contact with Uchiha Madara, Hammer did not recognize Uchiha Madara. But Hammer is very familiar with Pepper, who often appears in public. After seeing Hammer, Pepper rushed up directly, grabbed Hammer's arm, and loudly questioned the current situation. After all, the steel battle suit was taken out by Hammer. Facing a woman, Hammer did not take it seriously, apparently feeling that Pepper had little force. Only seeing the contemptuous expression on Hanmo's face, Uchiha Madara chuckled lightly, and then stepped forward with a big stride. He grabbed Hanmer's shoulder. Immediately after, Uchiha Madara twisted Hanmer's hand back, and Hanmer's head was directly pressed on the table. This position was obviously very uncomfortable for Hanmer, and it was hard for him to breathe. At this time, Hanmer began to be afraid. Where is Ivan? Uchiha Madara asked coldly. Advertisement. Hearing Uchiha Madara utter the name, Hammer knew that he couldn't hide it. And now that his own life is in the hands of others, how can Hammer dare to cheat? He is in my company now. Hammer's voice was choppy because his throat was just blocked. After knowing the answer he wanted, Uchiha Madara released the hand that bound Hammer, then glared at Hammer before turning around and walking outside. Natasha followed, leaving Pepper alone in the control room. Fortunately, Happy ran over immediately. Uchiha Madara pointed to the control room seat, and then took Natasha to Hammer's company. Backquote. We don't need to find a car, just go there. Natasha asked curiously, looking at Uchiha Madara who was striding. No, I'm much faster than driving. Uchiha Madara replied in a very confident tone. Then, under Natasha's doubtful eyes, Uchiha Madara grabbed Natasha's arm. After a pause for a few seconds, Uchiha Madara rushed to the sky with Natasha, and Natasha couldn't help exclaiming at this sudden move. There were some voices of surprise to Natasha. Uchiha Madara just smiled and didn't want to explain. Soon Uchiha Madara and Natasha landed downstairs in the Hammer Lee's industry. Now is not the time to be polite, so Uchiha Madara kicked the door directly downstairs. Although it was locked on top, under Uchiha Madara's Rikido, this door was simply vulnerable, and it was directly kicked to the ground by the live broadcast class. The security guards in Hammer Industries naturally heard such a big movement. Several guards rushed out, and without saying a word, they directly attacked Uchiha Madara and Natasha. But the triangular cats of these guards don't need Uchiha Madara's own hands, and Natasha can easily solve it. Uchiha Madara just needs to follow Natasha calmly, and then walk into Hammer Industries very calmly. Although Uchiha Madara appears to be very calm on the surface, he is always alert to the disturbances around him. After all, Ivan is very cunning. Chapter 302 Rewriting Code. Advertisement. And since Ivan can imitate the steel suit, it shows that Ivan's level is not low. No one knows what kind of technology is still in the hands of hundreds of millions of people, so it is better to be careful, and Uchiha Madara also brings Natasha with him. There are still a lot of guards in this building, but the fighting skills of Uchiha Madara and Natasha are enough to defeat these guards. Originally, I didn't want to waste time on these irrelevant people, so Chibo Madara's movements were very neat. At the beginning Uchiha Madara's goal was also very clear, that is to find Ivan. The progress on Uchiha Madara's side is still smooth, but Tony has suffered a lot. After all, the goals of so many steel warriors are basically aimed at Tony. Especially the steel suit that Colonel Roddy was wearing. Ivan is sure Tony won't do anything to his friend Roddy, so the main force attacking Tony is basically Roddy. Although he is not very clear about the situation outside, but after thinking about it a little bit, Uchiha Madara knows that Tony's current situation is not very good. So it is still necessary to quickly change the program written by Ivan, otherwise Tony may really have trouble. After all, the use of new elements is not very smooth. 550 Soon Uchiha Madara brought Natasha to Ivan's office, pushed the door and went in, but Ivan was not there. Only a man in a guard's uniform was hung in the air. The room wasn't big, but it was packed with all kinds of equipment and looked very messy. In the middle of the room, the floor was pried open, and there were many wires extending from it. Ivan probably escaped by relying on this exit. Damn it, he actually escaped. After seeing the situation in the room, Natasha couldn't help but cursed in a low voice. But now the most important target is not Ivan. Uchiha Madara quickly walked to the front of the computer and looked at the dense code on the screen. In order to study the steel suit before, Uchiha Madara has learned various codes, not the top, but still the Grandmaster. But the hateful thing is that Ivan uses a language that Uchiha Madara is not very good at. Advertisement. Although simple communication is possible, changing code is a very serious business. In case of any accident, Tony will suffer, so Uchiha Madara did not act rashly. Natasha also came over at this time, although Uchiha Madara did not speak the language. But although Natasha is now an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., if there is an argument, Natasha and Ivan are actually from the same country. Therefore, this language is not difficult for Natasha, and Natasha is a special agent trained by S.H.I.E.L.D., which is basically a decathlon. So this code is not particularly difficult for Natasha. Seeing that Uchiha Madara was just standing in front of the computer without any action, Natasha understood in her heart. So Natasha quickly walked to Uchiha Madara's side and moved the keyboard to a more convenient location for her. Leave it to me, it's my native language, Natasha said confidently. Since Natasha has said so, Uchiha Madara is naturally handing over the home game to Natasha. Fortunately, Natasha did not disappoint Uchiha Madara. The movement was very smooth, and it seemed that there were indeed several brushes. The code on the screen kept changing under Natasha's control, and finally a few big characters that allowed to ask questions appeared, and Natasha hurriedly pursued the victory. The most important thing now is the steel suit on Colonel Roddy's body. Colonel Roddy must be controlled first. This is Tony's biggest trouble. Natasha obviously understood this, as each steel suit had different instructions, and Natasha found the one belonging to Colonel Roddy immediately. After restarting Colonel Roddy's battle suit, AFBB, it finally solved Tony's biggest trouble, and soon Tony's face was projected on the computer screen. Relax, your buddy should be back by now, Uchiha Madara joked with a smile on his face. Hearing this, Tony was also relieved, and then expressed his gratitude to Uchiha Madara. You don't need to thank me, you should thank Agent Romanov, this time she helped change the code. Uchiha Madara shook his head and explained to Tony. Advertisement. Although there are some prejudices against Romanov for various reasons, Tony is not an ignorant person. This time Natasha really helped a lot, so Tony expressed his gratitude to Natasha very sincerely. How about the new reactor? Shouldn't there be any adverse reactions? Uchiha Madara quickly got to the point and asked with concern. Hearing this question, a very proud smile appeared on Tony's face, and he gestured towards Uchiha Madara that everything was fine. It's very good, it should be said that it can't be better, it's not going to die for the time being. Tony said in a very excited tone. Although this performance seems a bit exaggerated, it also proves that Tony's current state is indeed very good, and Uchiha Madara is also relieved. But at this time, Pepper seemed to have cracked the code, and Pepper's voice came over. But now Pepper's face is not good, after all, Tony's words are indeed a little scary. What do you mean? What do you mean you can't die temporarily? Do you mean you would have died? Pepper asked in a somewhat angry voice. Tony's expression froze after hearing Pepper's voice, and he froze in place with some embarrassment. The glib and sloppy muddy that has always been shown at ordinary times is very dull at this time. I don't know how to explain it to Pepper, I can only shake my head and say that I have nothing to do now. But for Pepper, Tony's attitude was like an indifferent attitude, and he didn't put his own life in the eye at all, so Pepper was even more angry. Maybe this is just a little bit of speculation, Uchiha Madara and Natasha can only watch Tony and Pepper quarrel in stunned eyes. This situation is simply unexpected for the two of them, and they don't know how to deal with it. It wouldn't be a big deal in normal times, but now the situation is more complicated. Uchiha Madara saw that some red dots appeared on the screen, and those red dots were approaching Tony's position, so Uchiha Madara had to speak to interrupt the two. After all, you can quarrel anytime, but there is only one life. Chapter 303 Old Friends Reconciliation. Advertisement. Okay, if you have anything to say, you can go back and talk. Tony is approaching you now. Uchiha Madara raised the volume slightly and said to Tony. After hearing Uchiha Madara's voice, Tony and Pepper finally calmed down, but it is more important to get through the immediate difficulties first. Okay, I will go back and apologize to you when I deal with these people. Tony said to Pepper very seriously. Please, now is not the time to talk about this, you should focus on the things in front of you. Pepper's voice was full of helplessness. After a few words of exchange, the two finally reached a consensus, and Tony also set out to deal with the steel warriors who were about to approach. Uchiha Madara and Natasha continued to stare at the screen, which could see the movements of all the iron warriors. Uchiha Madara and Natasha also breathed a sigh of relief after seeing that several steel warriors were solved by Tony and Roddy, and a slight smile appeared on their faces. It seems that the two of them cooperated well, so they should have reconciled. Uchiha Madara's tone was also much more relaxed. Although it seems that the steel warriors around Tony have been cleaned up, Uchiha Madara has not taken it lightly, and still keeps an eye on the movement on the screen. Soon Uchiha Madara saw another steel warrior appearing on the screen, constantly approaching Tony's direction, and this steel warrior was not the same as before. Tony has another steel warrior approaching you, and its propulsion power is very fast. Uchiha Madara reminded. Just when Uchiha Madara's voice fell, the steel warrior had already arrived at Tony's location. Something's wrong. Uchiha Madara heard some muffled voices from Tony. I'm so moved to see you here. A familiar voice came out. Uchiha Madara thought about it for a while and heard that the voice belonged to Ivan. However, it doesn't seem to be an accident that Ivan went to find Tony. After all, for Ivan, this is like a bloody feud. After all, it was the person who developed these steel warriors. Since Ivan wanted to seek revenge from Tony, he must have prepared himself with the best performance. So Uchiha Madara still has some concerns about Tony's safety, to be honest. Fortunately, Tony didn't turn off the communication button at all, so Uchiha Madara could hear Tony's voice, and he could judge Tony's situation from the voice. Advertisement. But it didn't sound very good. Basically all Uchiha Madara heard was Tony and Roddy being beaten. Because of his keen hearing, Uchiha Madara heard the sound of a whip from Tony's side. Combined with the scene of seeing Ivan for the first time, Uchiha Madara guessed the weapon Ivan used. And after so long, this weapon must have been transformed. Tony and Roddy's suits are all metal, and it is indeed a disadvantage to deal with Ivan. After a few seconds, Uchiha Madara heard it, and there were some painful sounds from Tony and Roddy, mixed with electric sounds. After hearing this voice, Uchiha Madara couldn't sit still. It was obvious that Tony and Roddy did have some difficulties dealing with Ivan. Although Uchiha Madara has always pursued a stalking policy, the premise of stalking is to save his life. Therefore, after thinking for a while, Uchiha Madara was ready to go out and take a look. Tony, can you hold on? I'll come over now and hold on for a while, Uchiha Madara said to Tony. Although it was a little difficult to breathe, Tony refused after hearing Uchiha Madara's voice. Don't use it, I can solve it myself, Tony said with some difficulty. This answer sounded like Uchiha, and Tony was simply crazy, and he was still trying to be brave at this time. Now is not the time to be hero s. Uchiha Madara had some helpless persuasion. However, at this time, Tony was very determined, and it seemed that he had already thought of a good idea. Don't worry, I'm not trying to be brave, I'm very sober, I've already thought of a way. 39 Tony's tone is very serious. But Uchiha Madara did not answer Tony, and was still caught in his own thoughts. Tony seemed a little disappointed when he didn't hear Uchiha Madara's answer, but soon got up and started to persuade Uchiha Madara. Trust me, I'm Iron Man, and I want everyone to see that Iron Man can protect them. Tony said in a very serious tone. Advertisement. 0. For flowers. To be honest, if it is for other reasons, Uchiha Madara can completely ignore it, but this statement makes Uchiha Madara unable to refuse at all. Because Uchiha Madara is very aware of the slander that Tony received some time ago. Everyone is not optimistic about Tony. For Tony, who is arrogant, the distrust of others is simply more difficult to accept than letting himself die. So after a few seconds of silence, Uchiha Madara gave a very low, Give you one last chance, if I can't solve it, I will do it myself. Uchiha Madara also put forward his own requirements. I hope Tony can do what he can. 0. Don't worry, there will be absolutely no problem, Tony assured. No matter how nice it sounds, the final result is what matters. Uchiha Madara didn't say much, so as not to distract Tony, he just kept an eye on the battle over there. Uchiha Madara and Natasha can't see the specific situation over there because they are not there, but it can be guessed from the conversation between Tony and Roddy. Uchiha Madara only heard Tony ask Roddy if he wanted to be hero s, and then no voice was heard. After a few seconds Uchiha Madara heard Tony and Roddy shouting to get ready, followed by a very loud explosion. After the explosion, Uchiha Madara saw that the little dot on the screen that belonged to Ivan had dimmed, and it seemed that Tony and Roddy had succeeded. But before they could be happy, Uchiha Madara and Natasha got bad news from Roddy. He has installed explosive devices in every steel warrior's body, and it will be activated soon. Roddy said in a flustered voice. Hearing this, Tony became a little flustered. Damn it, Pepper is still in the venue. Tony's tone became unpleasant, and Uchiha Madara naturally understood the importance of Pepper to Tony. Relax Tony, I'll go and bring Pepper out right away, it only takes a second. Uchiha Madara said to Tony in a very calm tone. Chapter 304 Quarrel. Advertisement. Because of the urgency of time, Uchiha Madara didn't care about explaining anything to Tony, and directly used the ability of teleportation to appear outside the venue. The place where Uchiha Madara just landed was where Pepper was staying. As soon as Uchiha Madara stood firm, he heard a very clear ticking sound in this quiet place. It is estimated that the time bomb is about to explode, and the countdown is now on. Seeing Uchiha Madara suddenly appear in front of him, Pepper was also very surprised. Although it has always been known that Uchiha Madara is not a simple character, this is the first time Pepper has been exposed to Uchiha Madara's abilities so directly. But now Uchiha Madara didn't have time to explain this matter carefully, just grabbed Pepper's arm, and then moved back to the 550 office where he was staying before. Fortunately, Uchiha Madara moved quickly enough, because he had returned to the office of the Hammer Group, so neither Uchiha Madara nor Pepper knew what happened at the meeting place afterward. At the moment Uchiha Madara dragged Pepper and disappeared, all the steel suits with time bombs exploded at the same time. There were still quite a few steel warriors lying on the ground in the entire venue, so almost the entire venue was turned into a rubble. If Uchiha Madara moved a little slower for a second or two, Pepper would have evaporated inside. Natasha was also relieved to see that Uchiha Madara returned safely with Pepper. Natasha was also very surprised by the ability Uchiha Madara showed, but she managed to control her emotions. Moreover, as an agent, Natasha is also very aware of what she cannot touch, so she has no desire to find out. All of this happened a little too suddenly, so although he had reached a safe position, Pepper still looked dumbfounded and did not recover. Pepper, are you okay? It's safe now, and Tony will be back soon. Uchiha Madara glanced at Pepper and said with concern. After hearing Uchiha Madara's voice, Pepper gradually woke up. Advertisement. And although he is just an ordinary person, he has been with Tony for a long time, and he has seen all kinds of strange things. Therefore, Pepper quickly calmed down and did not ask too much about Uchiha Madara's peculiar ability. Mr. Uchiha Madara, thank you very much this time. Pepper said very sincerely. Although it is unclear what happened at the venue, Pepper was not deaf, and naturally heard the obvious ticking. And if the situation wasn't very critical, Uchiha Madara wouldn't have brought himself here in a hurry. So Pepper is still grateful to Uchiha Madara even though he didn't see the situation in person. For Uchiha Madara, the life-saving grace in Pepper's eyes was nothing but a hands-on effort. So Zebo Madara just waved at Pepper, indicating that it is a trivial matter, don't take it too seriously. If this is a movie, then Ivan is the biggest villain. Now that Ivan has been successfully resolved by Tony and Roddy, the people of Uchiha Madara are also relieved, they just need to stay here and wait for Tony and Roddy. Because they were wearing steel suits, Tony and Roddy soon arrived downstairs in the Hammer Group, and Uchiha Madara took Natasha and Pepper to find them to meet. The afterlife is of course very fortunate, but for Pepper, it is more stress and collapse, which Pepper has not shown before in front of Uchiha Madara. But after seeing Tony, Pepper rushed forward and kept beating Tony's chest with his own hands. Why don't you fight after I take off the steel suit? I can't feel the pain now. Tony grabbed Pepper's arm and said with a smile. But now Pepper doesn't have the heart to joke with Tony, and he just stares at Tony with a crying face. I'm really fed up with these scary days, I give up, I'm quitting. Pepper said to Tony in a somewhat broken tone. Advertisement. It did happen a bit suddenly, and in Uchiha Madara's view, it was Tony's own business. So Uchiha Madara took Natasha and Roddy to the side, watching this scene with a natural expression, just like watching a movie. Pepper's decision was obviously unexpected to Tony, but now the expression on Pepper's face was very serious, which gave Tony a bad feeling. Are you kidding me? Neither me nor the company can do without you. Tony, who has always been omnipotent, finally learned to show weakness and looked at Pepper with pitiful eyes. Of course I'm serious. I'll let it go smoothly with the handover of the company, and nothing will happen. Pepper said in a very serious tone. I'm fed up with days like this, I'm afraid that that day you will destroy the company or yourself. It can be seen that Pepper was really under pressure during this time. When it comes to the back, there are some broken voices, which are completely shouted. For Tony, Pepper's decision was indeed a bit sudden. And Pepper is not just a subordinate to Tony, so in the face of Pepper, who is emotionally broken now, Tony still wants to keep it. Are you serious? You know that you are very important to me, and neither the company nor I can do without you. Tony took a step forward and looked at Pepper with very sincere eyes. But it was obvious that Pepper wanted to teach Tony a lesson. Facing Tony's plea to put down his body, Pepper did not soften his heart, and still looked at Tony unmoved. However, on the matter of retaining Pepper, Tony showed exceptional determination, and he did not flinch in the face of Pepper's cold eyes. I promise that there will be no such thing in the future, I will try my best to live. Tony said with a very serious expression. For Tony to be able to say such things, it is already a great improvement. And Pepper didn't really want to embarrass Tony, but he really couldn't stand such a life, so after Tony made a promise, Pepper didn't embarrass Tony. I hope you can remember today's promise, and I will give you another chance at the end. Pepper's tone was also very serious, and it was obvious that he was not joking. Tony was very happy to be able to get such a sentence, and nodded to Pepper quickly, for fear that Pepper would go back on it. Chapter 305 Plan for Automatic Subscription. Advertisement. Chapter 305 Proposal. There is actually no major conflict between the two, and now the friction is finally resolved, both Uchiha Madara and Roddy are very relieved to see it. But probably because this quarrel was so real, Tony and Pepper seemed to have forgotten the existence of Uchiha Madara and others. After the two finally reconciled, Tony took a step forward and gave Pepper a hug. It's not really that big of a deal, but there's still a whole lot of stuff waiting for Uchiha Madara and others to sort it out. Seeing this scene, Uchiha Madara and Roddy couldn't help but pretended to cough a few times, finally attracting Tony's attention back. You guys are still here. I thought you were all gone. Turning back to Uchiha Madara and the others, Tony said in a very surprised tone. This is simply not a human word, and Uchiha Madara rolled his eyes at Tony. It seems that we do have some excess, so let's go quickly and don't get in the way of others here. Uchiha Madara deliberately said this to Roddy and Natasha. Pepper's face is not like Tony's, it is thicker than the city wall, and he lowered his head a little embarrassed after hearing Uchiha 05 Madara's words. But Uchiha Madara is just complaining, since Tony and Pepper still have something to say. Uchiha Madara is not here as a light bulb. Uchiha Madara dragged Roddy and Natasha directly and left. After all, such a big commotion broke out, and I don't know what kind of rumors would spread outside. Uchiha Madara is still the chief CEO of Stark Group, and naturally he has to deal with these things. Sure enough, this matter has not been finalized yet, and many people called Uchiha Madara to inquire about the specific process. The inside and outside is to explore what kind of connection Tony has with this matter. Uchiha Madara is simply annoying. Therefore, after Fury asked Tony to meet, Uchiha Madara directly threw everything in the company into Pepper's hands, and then went to meet with Tony. After arriving at the location, Fury hadn't come yet. Advertisement. Although the host did not appear, Uchiha Madara and Tony acted very leisurely and sat on the chairs with a calm expression. At this time, Tony happened to see a plan book on the table in front. There was nothing to do anyway, so Tony picked up the plan book directly. The Avengers Preliminary Plan. Tony read the words on the cover of the plan unconsciously. Hearing this name, Uchiha Madara's face showed a clear expression. It seems that Fury has not given up his plan until now. Although Uchiha Madara is very aware of this plan and has given support, but now the Avengers have no connection with Uchiha Madara. Because Bo Madara just sat in his seat without saying a word, and didn't plan to say much. Just when Tony was about to open the plan, Fury finally arrived late, and then held Tony's hand. Seeing Fury who was stopping him, Tony raised his head in confusion and looked at Fury with a puzzled face. I don't want you to see it now, because I'm not sure if it has anything to do with you. Fury said something awkward. Then, in Tony's curious eyes, Fury directly picked up another book and swayed in front of Tony. At the same time, there is also an evaluation report of Agent Romanov on you. Fury said calmly. This book should have something to do with him, so Tony directly opened the assessment report and read it aloud with a calm expression. Uchiha Madara has been sitting by the side very calmly, and did not say anything, but he has already made it clear about Fury's purpose. From the time he saw the Avengers Preliminary Plan on the table, Uchiha Madara knew that Fury was still a thief and wanted to draw Tony in. Although Uchiha Madara has no interest in joining the so-called Avengers, Tony can make his own choice, and Uchiha Madara will not interfere much. Because he didn't want to add his own thoughts to Tony's head, Uchiha Madara sat silently and did not express any opinion. At this time, Tony also read the assessment report of the Romanov team and himself, and a disapproving expression appeared on his face. Advertisement. But at this time Tony has seen the back and found that Romanov's suggestion for recruiting Iron Man is recommended recruiting. Seeing this, Tony's face Jonan couldn't help showing a slightly smug expression. But Fury didn't seem to notice the emotion on Tony's face, just looked at Tony calmly. Go back and look at the last sentence. Fury said in a very low voice. Hearing this, Tony turned the booklet to the end with some curiosity, and then Tony's expression changed suddenly. Do you recommend Tony Tank? Don't agree. Probably a little surprised, Tony's voice was raised a lot at once. Although there has not been much movement from the side, Uchiha Madara has already predicted the situation. Hearing this conclusion, Uchiha Madara is not very surprised. After all, Tony's character is indeed a little disobedient. But everyone has a common problem, that is, they often have no self-awareness. Tony obviously has such shortcomings, and his performance is very obvious. Therefore, after seeing this conclusion, the expression on Tony's face was not quite right. He looked at Fury with disbelief, and issued a series of questions. Why are there such different judgments for two people? I try to change normally and live a good life with Pepper. Tony said with some grievances. Why can I accept Iron Man but not the real me? I already have a brand new heart. To be honest, Tony didn't act so urgently about joining S.H.I.E.L.D., but this observation report aroused Tony's desire to win. And for Tony, Iron Man and Tony Stark are the same person without any difference, so Tony is so unacceptable to this conclusion. But Fury didn't mean to change at all, just looked at Tony calmly. Of course we have our own considerations. For now, we think you can only serve as a consultant. Fury sat on the table and said in a somewhat indifferent tone. Hearing these words, the expression on Tony's face changed, and then a smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Then Tony suddenly stood up and extended his right hand to Fury. Chapter 306 Transaction for Automatic Subscription. Advertisement. Chapter 306 Trading. Seeing Tony's sudden move, let alone Fury, even Uchiha Madara was a little surprised, thinking that Tony had changed his temper. Just when Fury stretched out his hand to shake it back, Tony suddenly retracted his hand with a proud smile on his face. And Fury's hand stayed empty in midair, looking really embarrassed. But in the end, it is the chief director of S.H.I.E.L.D. Over the years, Fury has experienced more embarrassing things than this. So Fury quickly sorted out his emotions and took his hand back without haste. I think my appearance fee is relatively high, and you may not be able to afford me. Tony said proudly, and then turned to leave. But with Uchiha Madara's understanding of Tony, this is definitely not Tony's final choice, and there must be a later move. S.H.I.E.L.D. is an official organization, not a black-hearted gang, so naturally it can't do things like forced buying and selling. Therefore, in the face of Tony's refusal, Fury was not angry, but just stood in his position with a calm expression. Originally, Uchiha Madara thought it was a very exciting Jalen contest, but he did not expect to give up so easily. Uchiha Madara sighed a little boringly. But since both of them already had the same opinion, Uchiha Madara naturally couldn't press his head and let the two fight. So after seeing Tony stand up and prepare to leave, Uchiha Madara stretched a little lazily, and prepared to stand up and leave with Tony. But before Uchiha Madara could stand up, the annoying phone rang again. Although he really wants to quit, Uchiha Madara believes that he is still very professional, and he will not do anything to leave without a burden before things are handed over. So despite some impatience, Uchiha Madara answered the phone very quickly. Fortunately, this time, it was not someone who wanted to hear the news, but Pepper. Normally, Pepper wouldn't call Uchiha Madara when it wasn't working hours unless it was a very critical situation. Advertisement. So Uchiha Madara also has some curiosity about what happened. To be honest, Uchiha Madara has basically not received any good news during this time. Even though Tony has just defeated Ivan and saved the whole city, the criticism of Tony is still endless. So when he answered the phone, Uchiha Madara had no hope at all. But this time it turned out to be beyond Uchiha Madara's expectations, and Pepper came back with great news. This time the official finally did not pretend to be deaf and dumb, and the contribution of Tony and Colonel Roddy was prepared. Specially prepared to award Tony and Colonel Roddy for their contribution to the city. Maybe it was too much surprise, and Pepper's voice was still a little trembling. Although Uchiha Madara behaved more calmly, it could not hide the joy in Uchiha Madara's heart. When Uchiha Madara answered the phone, Fury and Tony both looked at Uchiha Madara curiously, but didn't say anything out of good upbringing. After Uchiha Madara hung up the phone, Tony and Fury looked at Uchiha Madara curiously. This is really good news, so Uchiha Madara didn't plan to hide it, just looked at Tony with joy. This look is really a bit strange. Tony can only look at Uchiha Madara with a puzzled face. Congratulations, it seems that you are able to make a good show this time, they are ready to hold an award ceremony for you. Uchiha Madara said with a smile. Sure enough, after hearing Uchiha Madara's words, Tony was very excited. In fact, honor is the same thing for Tony. In the final analysis, it is still to breathe a sigh of relief for himself. After all, Tony also knows how serious the criticism of himself has been during this time. After getting such good news, Tony was not in a hurry to leave. He didn't know what to think, and suddenly showed a very bright smile to Fury. Looking at this smile, Uchiha Madara knew that Tony must have come up with some bad idea again. Advertisement. But anyway, it has nothing to do with Uchiha Madara. Uchiha Madara is just a leisurely look that has nothing to do with himself. I suddenly had an idea, why don't I make a deal with you with my payment? Tony looked at Fury very confidently, and seemed to have decided that Fury would not refuse. This is also true. For Fury, this seems to be a surefire deal, and Fury naturally has no reason to refuse. However, Fury agreed without taking a breath, but raised his chin towards Tony and motioned Tony to talk about what kind of deal first. Backquote. This is not a big deal, but since I want to give me an award, I think I should be qualified to choose the presenter. Tony said, rubbing his chin. The words have already been said so clearly, if you don't understand it again, it is no different from a fool. For Fury, this is not difficult to do, so after a little thought, Fury immediately agreed. No problem, I can try my best to help you arrange. Although he already had a choice in his heart, Fury didn't say too much. But for Tony, getting such a promise was enough. Before Uchiha Madara felt that Tony would not choose to refuse to join the Avengers because of Fury's words. Now, everything is as expected by Uchiha Madara. The award ceremony just happened to give Tony a step up. To say that sometimes Tony's performance is indeed very contradictory. In many Li Lihao times, Tony is an unusually generous person, but he is often preoccupied with small things. For example, in the previous hearing, because of the hearing and some subsequent remarks, the congressman and Tony at the hearing seemed to have forged a relationship. The reason why Tony said he wanted to exchange his salary as a consultant was also because of this congressman. Knowing that this congressman disliked him very well, Tony insisted that Fury invite this congressman to serve as his presenter. Although it seems a little unkind, but Uchiha Madara is completely watching a good show, but will not persuade Tony to attack. As for Fury, anyway, now Fury is more concerned about whether he can draw Tony to shield. So Uchiha Madara and others decided this matter without the congressman's knowledge. Chapter 307 Awards Ceremony for Automatic Subscription. Advertisement. Chapter 307 Awards Ceremony. Tony agrees to serve as a consultant to the Avengers on the first premise that Fury can meet his requirements. Therefore, everything is still inconclusive. Tony will not stay here any longer, and soon called Uchiha Madara, and returned to the villa in Malibu together. Now it's just that the official side has contacted the Stark Group, expressing that they want to reward Tony for his efforts in this operation. But there is still no conclusion on how to do it, so Uchiha Madara and Tony are not very anxious. After all, when everything is inconclusive, worrying is useless. However, the scope of this matter is indeed very wide, and ordinary people have also seen Tony's important role in this battle, so Iron Man's reputation has risen again and again. The official also hopes to express their attitude as soon as possible to gain the recognition and support of the public, so it didn't take long for the official to come to inform this matter. Because Tony couldn't be reached, the call quickly reached Uchiha's cell phone. After confirming the progress of the matter, Uchiha Madara asked who would give Tony the award in the end. When talking about this topic, the people who came to contact this matter were a little embarrassed. Sorry, we were going to have someone more prestigious to award Mr. Stark and Colonel Roddy, but to be honest, when Uchiha Madara first heard these remarks, his heart sank, thinking that Furui had not made arrangements, and something went wrong in the middle. But after listening to this person's explanation, Uchiha's Wei was a bit dumbfounded. To be honest, this is also a bit of a deviation in the communication at the beginning. After all, in the eyes of ordinary people, it is naturally the position of the presenter, and the higher it is, the more it can represent one's own identity. So at the beginning, these people were going to let someone like the vice president give Tony the award, but in the end, they didn't know what was going on, and they replaced it with a congressman. Advertisement. These people were also afraid that Tony and Colonel Roddy would feel slighted, unaware that Tony had made the request himself. The person in charge of contacting Uchiha Madara about these matters is probably a young girl who just graduated, so when I think of the change in the middle, the whole AFBB person is full of fear. Uchiha Madara only felt a burst of laughter inside, and after all, it was Tony's own request. Even if it wasn't Tony's own request, Uchiha Madara wouldn't embarrass a little girl with this kind of thing, so before hanging up the phone, Uchiha Madara gave a rare reassurance. After hanging up the phone, Uchiha Madara went to Tony to talk about the progress of the matter. Furui was still very fast, and Tony was particularly satisfied with the result. The time soon came to the agreed day, and there was nothing to do in the group anyway, so Uchiha Madara went to the scene to join in the fun. This event is still relatively grand, and the official also makes sense to promote themselves through this event, so this award ceremony will still be broadcast live. Before the start of the awards ceremony, the presenter first came forward to tell about the efforts of Tony and Roddy this time, which in the end was a wave of rainbow farts. And Fury did not disappoint Tony, and indeed invited the former Senator Stan to be the presenter. The congressman's performance was indeed very funny and reluctant, but in front of so many people, he had to pretend to praise Tony. And calling Tony a national treasure of the whole country is even more uncomfortable than killing this congressman, and the fake smile on his face can't be maintained. Tony stood in the back and smiled very brightly. Obviously, the harder the congressman behaved, the happier Tony would be. I don't know where he learned this bad taste. When wearing the award sheet for Tony, I didn't know what Tony said, but the expression on the congressman's face was not very good. Although I don't know what I said, it was not a good thing. Uchiha Madara smothered his head and laughed, and Tony was in high spirits when they took the group photo at the end. It's just that the congressman was sandwiched between the two, and the smile on his face was as unpredictable as the Mona Lisa's smile. In any case, this fake awards ceremony is finally over, although there are some fakes, but fortunately Tony is the biggest winner. Advertisement. After all, the debate over whether Iron Man should exist was too big, but Tony proved that Iron Man can protect the world. And now that the official award has been awarded to Tony, it will be much more difficult to go back on it later, and Tony's life will be much closer. After the awards ceremony, countless reporters rushed to interview Tony, completely forgetting the cynicism about Tony a while ago. Perhaps this is the inferiority of human beings, and there is always a mentality of saying that the grapes are sour when they cannot eat grapes. But in any case, Tony's current achievements are indeed not those who can compare to you. Tony, who is proud of the spring breeze, is naturally not stingy with his smile, and the state of the whole person is also very good during the interview. Although I feel a little jealous of Tony's performance, these reporters are all very winking now, and they are all peaceful. After a few brief interviews, Tony and Colonel Roddy, surrounded by others, headed to their own celebration. Although Colonel Roddy is also in the limelight, where Tony Stark is, others tend to be foils. At the celebration party, many people gathered around Tony, but there were some people around Colonel Roddy who were left out. Not very interested in these fake courtesies, so Uchiha Madara simply showed his face, and then went back to the villa to rest. He probably saw the hypocrisy of these people. Tony, who has always been keen on various parties, actually returned to the villa early, which surprised Uchiha Madara a little. But Tony has grown up anyway, which makes Uchiha Madara feel a little gratified. Although this award was not given to the Uchiha class was also very excited. Before serving as the CEO of Stark Group, it was a helpless move to catch ducks on the shelves. Now Uchiha Madara feels that Tony's career is going well and his love is happy, so he can retire naturally. Although the talent in finance is very high, but Uchiha Madara really has no interest in these mundane things. Chapter 308 Resignation for Automatic Subscription. Advertisement. Chapter 308 Resignation. Congratulations, now that the stock is going up continuously, no one will ever want to kick you out of the board again. Uchiha Madara raised his glass to Tony and said in a very pleasant tone. Hearing this, Tony smiled, and then quickly changed the subject to Uchiha Madara. Now that you are the CEO of the group, I should be the one to congratulate you. Tony said with a smile. Seeing Tony's expression, Uchiha Madara knew that Tony must have understood what he meant. But obviously Tony didn't want to take this hot potato back, so he turned the topic to himself. But Uchiha Madara is really fed up with the days of being bound like this. It was because of Howard and Tony's own face that Uchiha Madara was willing to help for a while. Tony is no longer in any serious trouble now, and Uchiha Madara just wants to get rid of it as soon as possible, go out and be chic. So in the face of Tony's pretending to be crazy, Uchiha Madara directly put down the trophy in his hand and looked at Tony very seriously. After all, I have a bad name and I have no contribution, so this CEO position is not suitable for me. 35 Uchiha Madara is quite euphemistic, said. But after Tony listened, a disapproving expression appeared on his face. How can you say that? During this period of time your contribution to the group is seen by everyone, and there is no more suitable person than you. Tony said sincerely. But this kind of ecstasy soup has no use for Uchiha Madara at all. Uchiha Madara shook his head unmoved, and still insisted on his own point of view. I'll just say it bluntly. It's my own problem. I think even as CEO, I have the right to resign. Uchiha Madara said very directly. After Uchiha Madara made it clear, Tony didn't know how to refute it. After all, neither labor law nor any law has ever restricted a person's freedom to resign. Since logically speaking, he can't beat Uchiha Madara, so Tony immediately changed his mind and began to sell badly to Uchiha Madara. Advertisement. But I think my current state is not good, and I have to take into account the mission of maintaining world peace, so I have no time to take care of the group. Tony said pitifully. This problem can be solved as long as there is money. Uchiha Madara thinks Tony's excuse is completely untenable. It's a completely trivial matter. You can pay to hire a professional again, he will be better than me. Uchiha Madara said calmly. Faced with such a soft and hard Uchiha Madara, Tony didn't know what to do, and could only sit in his seat silently. Uchiha Madara did not suggest Tony's silence, but instead spoke out his recommended candidates cheerfully. I think Pepper is very suitable. She is very prestigious within the group and has worked for many years. Uchiha Madara said very seriously. Hearing Uchiha Madara bring up this topic, Tony was quickly distracted, with a smug look on his face. Of course, Pepper has been by my side for almost 10 years, and she is one of the people I trust most. Tony said very excitedly. Seeing himself successfully diverted Tony's attention. A faint smile appeared at the corner of Uchiha Madara's mouth, but it was quickly hidden by Uchiha Madara. Isn't this just right? She should be interested in this too. I think it's time for you to give Pepper a promotion and a raise. Uchiha Madara said smoothly. Probably didn't expect Uchiha Madara to turn the topic back again. Tony scratched his hair in embarrassment and looked at Uchiha Madara helplessly. Now that this topic has been provoked, Uchiha Madara will naturally not give up easily and continue talking on his own. I think today is a very good day, why don't we just announce this matter directly? Although it was a question, Uchiha Madara's tone was very positive. Tony didn't know how to continue with these words, so he could only sit in his seat with a dull expression. On the contrary, the more Uchiha Madara thought about it, the more she felt that this decision was simply brilliant. She looked at Tony excitedly, wishing she could announce it immediately. That's it, I'm a genius, I'll let Pepper come over now. Uchiha Madara said excitedly. No, wait, this is too hasty. Tony said with some surprise. 0. For flowers. Advertisement. But Uchiha Madara has made a decision that basically no one can change. When Tony was talking, Uchiha Madara had already taken out his cell phone and sent the message to Pepper's cell phone. This decision was a bit sudden, so Pepper was also very surprised and rushed over in a hurry. Seeing Pepper appearing in Tony was like seeing a savior, showing unprecedented enthusiasm. Because Uchiha Madara's time as CEO is not very long, the template that was signed before is still there. Therefore, Yu Zibobin directly asked the legal department to draw up a contract according to his previous template. After Pepper came over, Uchiha Madara put the contract directly in front of Pepper. Sign it. After you sign it, you will be the new CEO. I hope you can bring the Stark Group to greater heights. Uchiha Madara said very excitedly. This development was somewhat beyond Pepper's expectations, but under Uchiha Madara's superb negotiating skills, Pepper dazedly picked up the pen and signed the contract. Tony wanted to stop it, but there was no chance to speak, so this matter was settled. Holding the contract that Pepper signed, a satisfied smile appeared on Uchiha Madara's face. Congratulations, our new chief CEO. Uchiha Madara's tone was more sincere than ever. After recovering, Pepper looked helplessly at the contract in his hand. But this matter has been settled. Uchiha Madara directly led Pepper to deal with the next thing. After Pepper left, Tony looked at Uchiha Madara helplessly, but the matter was a foregone conclusion, and Tony didn't know what to do. Because he is in a very good mood now, Uchiha Madara doesn't care about Tony's hesitancy, but instead looks at Tony with a smile. I think you should understand me, Tony, I shouldn't be bound by these things at all, I have my own pursuit. Uchiha Madara said sincerely. It's all said and done for this sake, so it's natural for Tony to refuse B. Chapter 309 Old Friends Reunited for automatic subscription. Advertisement. Chapter 309 Old Friends Meet Again. After getting the result he wanted, Uchiha Madara's expression became more and more relaxed, and he was no longer stingy with his smile towards Tony. Seeing the sullen expression on Tony's face, Uchiha Madara reached out and patted Tony's shoulder. This is already the best ending. It's too subservient for a talented person like me to manage a group. Uchiha Madara said proudly. The words have already been said for this sake, what else can Tony say? He just smiled helplessly, but he still didn't mean his blessings. Okay, if that's what you want. Tony shrugged, then said to Uchiha Madara with a smile. Today is a really good day, and I think it's worth celebrating. 35. Uchiha Madara reopened, 553, with a better bottle, then raised a glass to Tony, expressing his excitement. After the celebration, Uchiha Madara went back to pack his luggage. After all, the next Uchiha Madara may not stay in this country anymore. These days are so boring, Uchiha Madara needs to find some fun. Allowing yourself to live as calm as an ancient well can make some waves. Because he couldn't wait, Uchiha Madara just spoke to Tony Fury's people, and set off with his very simple luggage. It's just that the world is so big now that Uchiha Madara has no idea where to go. Now that the whole world is calm, Uchiha Madara has nowhere to go for fun. After thinking for a while, Uchiha Madara initially prepared to go to the temple. But after thinking about it, Uchiha Madara felt that he had not explored the mysteries of the entire universe, and Uchiha Madara was more curious about other planets than going to the temple. Thinking of this, Uchiha Madara immediately thought about where he would go next. If he went to other planets, it would be impossible for ordinary people. But Uchiha Madara now has the same ability as Carol, and can naturally travel freely in the universe. Advertisement. So he did what he said. Uchiha Madara found a deep mountain and an old forest, and then took advantage of the night to use his energy to rush out of the earth. Only when you look down on the earth in the universe will you feel your own insignificance. The entire universe is vast and boundless, and the distance between each planet is also very far away. But fortunately, Uchiha Madara has time, and now Uchiha Madara has basically become a cosmic wanderer, traveling on various planets. Some planets are barren and do not breed civilization at all, but some planets have given birth to low-level civilizations. There are even some planets that gave birth to advanced civilizations. Just like the Earth, there are creatures, and there are traces of the existence of advanced creatures. Although Uchiha Madara has almost heaven-defying abilities, she is a foreign guest after all. Therefore, Uchiha Madara will not act rashly without understanding the habits of the aborigines on this planet. Uchiha Madara basically doesn't know anyone in the universe, except for one Carol. However, according to the information obtained when they were separated last time, Carol seems to want to maintain the balance between the various planets, so the business should be very busy. And Uchiha Madara was not able to contact Carol's token. After all, the thing downstairs from Carol, Uchiha Madara was given to Fury. After all, the Earth is obviously the weaker one among all the galaxies, so it needs a trump card to protect the Earth. Fortunately, sometimes things happen by coincidence. When Uchiha Madara was passing by a relatively desolate planet, he suddenly felt a trace of energy fluctuations. This energy is very similar to the energy in oneself. After feeling this energy, Uchiha Madara went to another planet with the guidance of this energy, and just saw Carol standing in the center of everyone. Because the energy possessed by Uchiha Madara and Carol is basically the same, if the distance is relatively close, it is true that they can feel the echo between each other. However, because the distance is too far, this induction effect has not been exerted. Probably because he didn't see Uchiha Madara, Carol was still very calm, standing in the middle of everyone, not knowing what to say. Advertisement. It wasn't until one of the aliens saw Uchiha Madara and pointed in the direction of Uchiha Madara that Carol recovered. Originally, she looked in the direction of Uchiha Madara with a wary face, but when she found out that it was Uchiha Madara, a very surprised smile appeared on Carol's face immediately. Then, following the group of people who didn't know what to say, Carol walked directly in the direction of Uchiha Madara. My god, long time no see, you haven't changed for so many years. Carol's tone was full of surprises of reunion with old friends. Uchiha Madara is also not stingy with his smile, and gave Carol a warm hug. Do you still have something to deal with? If so, you can deal with your own affairs first. Uchiha Madara glanced at the desolate planet around him and said very understandingly. But Carol shook her head, indicating that it was over. It can be seen that among these aliens, Carol's reputation is very high, and everyone who sees Carol will greet Carol with a smile. Uchiha Madara followed behind Carol and walked into a house with some desolation. Carol brought a glass of wine for Uchiha Madara and put it in front of Uchiha Madara. It's a special product of their planet. It tastes good. You can try it, Carol said with a smile. Although I haven't seen each other for so many years, Uchiha Madara can see that Carol is in very good shape now. 1.1 Compared with the previous confusion, Carol now knows exactly what he wants, and his mental state is extremely full. It tastes good. It seems that you have had a very good life these years, and your whole state has changed. Uchiha Madara said with a smile. Carol did not refute Uchiha Madara's remarks, but a confident smile appeared on her face. Because now I know very well what I want, how about you? What have you been doing all these years? Carol asked curiously. Although he doesn't know much about the situation on Earth, Carol also knows that after so many years, it is impossible for normal people to have no changes in their faces. This is something that no skin care products and cosmetic surgery can do, so Carol is very curious about what happened to Uchiha Madara. Chapter 310 Visiting the Scrolls for automatic subscription. Advertisement. Chapter 310 Visiting the Scrolls. After sitting down, Carol's mouth basically did not stop, and kept throwing one question after another. Facing such an urgent Carol, a helpless smile appeared on Uchiha Madara's face. But after all, they are friends who have been through so many things together, so Uchiha Madara doesn't feel offended. How should I answer your so many questions? I just opened my mouth. Uchiha Madara said with a smile. At this time, Carol also heard that Uchiha Madara was making fun of herself, and gave Uchiha Madara a no-deterrent glance. But he couldn't control the smile on his face at all, and after a few seconds he couldn't help laughing again. Actually, it's nothing. I've been blind all these years, but Fury has already made some achievements. Uchiha Madara said casually. But this topic was successful in arousing Carol's interest. After all, after so many years in the universe, Carol really had no idea what was going on Earth. Even in Fury's case, Carol wasn't very clear. After all, the token that was left at the beginning only allowed Fury to summon Carol when Earth 05 was in danger. Usually there is nothing, Carol will not go to Earth. So after hearing about Fury's current situation, Carol looked at Uchiha Madara with expectant eyes. This is not a state secret, Uchiha Madara naturally has nothing to hide, and directly tells everything he knows. After hearing that Fury has now become the director of S.H.I.E.L.D., Carol showed a surprised expression, and then suddenly laughed out loud. Time flies so fast. When we first met, Fury was still a small clerk in S.H.I.E.L.D. Carol said with emotion. Hearing this, Uchiha Madara couldn't help but laugh. Advertisement. In fact, Uchiha Madara is not a person who likes to cherish the past, but after so many things, Uchiha Madara has indeed seen the preciousness of friends. Yeah, time flies so fast, we have all changed. Uchiha Madara was also very emotional about the changes over the years and couldn't help saying. But hearing this, Carol's face showed a disapproving expression. But I feel that you haven't changed at all, and you are still the same as when you first met. 35 Carol looked at Uchiha Madara seriously as she spoke, and then nodded her head very firmly. These words blew away all the emotions in Uchiha Madara's heart at once, and the originally dull atmosphere suddenly changed. Tell me, what have you been doing all these years? Wouldn't you be traveling between planets all the time? Uchiha Madara asked curiously. Talking about his own life, Carol's face showed a slight smile. Otherwise what else can I do? This is my ideal in life, and I have been working hard to achieve it. 35 Carol replied with a smile. From this smile, Uchiha Madara can see that Carol is very satisfied with her current life. In this case, Madara and Chia naturally won't say anything more, but silently express their blessings to Carol in their hearts. It's probably been too long since I had a good heart-to-heart with someone, and Carol couldn't hold back when he opened the chatter. While drinking wine, he talked ramble about the various things and people he had encountered over the years. Although the environment is peaceful, there are actually constant frictions between various planets. I deal with these things every day, Carol said with lowered eyes. Really? Then you did a very good job. I passed so many planets and didn't find any riots, Uchiha Madara said with admiration. Carol is naturally very happy when what she has done is seen by others, and a smile appeared on her face unconsciously, but her mouth was still humble. I just did what I was supposed to do, and this is my job, Carol said a little embarrassedly. After all, I haven't seen each other for so many years. After talking about the current situation, the two talked about the original things. After all, this is the only intersection between Uchiha Madara and Carol. Thinking of what happened back then, I had to mention the scrolls, and Uchiha Madara remembered that the scrolls, homes had long been destroyed. Advertisement. Therefore, I am very curious about the current development of the Skrull people. After all, for the Skrull people, it is all about building their own homeland from scratch. After so many years, Uchiha Madara wanted to see how far the Skrulls had come. Speaking of the current situation of the Skrulls, a very proud smile appeared on Carol's face, and it could be guessed from the smile that the Skrulls should be doing well now. After all, they have fewer people, so I found a small planet with more energy and more remote for them later. Carol said slowly. Hearing this, Uchiha Madara showed an expression of all ears, hoping that Carol could continue to speak. Fortunately, Carol is not a person who likes to sell things, so he didn't need Uchiha Madara to urge him, so he continued. It's a small planet and it doesn't get anyone else's attention, and they've grown so well over the years. 39. Hearing this, Uchiha Madara nodded with satisfaction. After all, 553 Uchiha Madara and Carol's people also experienced a lot of hardships before they saved the Skrulls. Now I hear that the people I rescued back then are still fine, which is naturally a happy thing. While talking, Carol suddenly put his wine glass on the bar and looked at Uchiha Madara excitedly. Hearing is false, seeing is believing, why don't I take you to the Skrulls' house now? Carol said excitedly. This time, Uchiha Madara didn't have any missions on her body, but she was just traveling at will, so after hearing this suggestion for a while, she immediately agreed. Now Uchiha Madara is an idler with nothing to do, but Carol should have a lot of things piled up. Therefore, after agreeing, Uchiha Madara also specifically asked. Of course I'm fine, but are you sure you have time? You should be quite busy, Uchiha Madara said curiously. Hearing Uchiha Madara's words, Carol smiled and waved his hand, indicating that there was nothing serious. The universe didn't explode without me, I just gave myself a vacation. Carol replied nonchalantly. Since the master said so, Uchiha Madara naturally no longer hesitated. Chapter 311 Unbearable Enthusiasm for automatic subscription. Advertisement. Chapter 311 Unbearable Enthusiasm. Both are very outspoken, so after Uchiha Madara and Carol made a decision, they didn't waste time. Although the distance in the universe is calculated in light years, if you want to use a spaceship, you don't know how long you should travel. But Uchiha Madara and Carol were still very relaxed, feeling just a few breaths, and soon arrived at the Skrulls' new home. Probably because their homeland had been invaded before, the Skrulls did not let their guard down even after living a stable life for so long. It is still every day that people and horses are arranged to patrol their own planet. Therefore, in the first moment Uchiha Madara and Carol arrived on this planet, they were discovered by the Skrulls. But this is also because Uchiha Madara and Carol didn't want to hide their itinerary at all. Originally, the Skrulls had already raised their Bushido, but after seeing Carol, their faces immediately showed a happy expression. Then they came around very enthusiastically, and surrounded Uchiha Madara and Carol in the middle. These Skrulls didn't know Uchiha Madara, after all, only their leader Talos should be familiar with Uchiha Madara. But Uchiha Madara came with Carol after all, so it didn't prevent these Skrulls from classifying Uchiha Madara as their own. So surrounded by these Skrulls, Uchiha Madara and Carol were soon led to a house that looked better. But this is only limited to contrast, and it is completely incomparable with those magnificent buildings that Uchiha has seen. But even so, it can be seen that the Skrull people are really seeing their homeland well these years. And probably because they have been to the Earth, these Skrull people can absorb the architectural style of the Earth. If you don't look at the environment of this planet, but only look at the buildings on the planet, no one will refute it if you say it is on Earth. Advertisement. It was probably because someone had already reported the letter in advance, so Talos had already come out early. After seeing the figures of Uchiha Madara and Carol, a very excited smile appeared on Taro's face. When Uchiha Madara walked to Talos, Talos bowed deeply towards Uchiha. Long time no see, my benefactor, I thought I would never have the chance to see you again in my life. Talos said excitedly. Uchiha Madara had guessed a lot of Talos' reaction, but he didn't expect it to be like this, so Uchiha Madara didn't react for a while. After reacting, the Uchiha Madara alliance helped Talos up. Don't block the door, let's go in first, Uchiha said with some embarrassment. Because so many Skrulls gathered around, it was like watching monkeys. Uchiha Madara had no interest in performing for others. After entering the room and sitting down, Talos immediately served drinks and food. In fact, although this planet is said to be relatively rich in resources, in the end the planet itself is not very large, and even if it is rich in resources, there is a limit. So seeing a big round table full of food, Uchiha Madara knew that the Skrulls were spending a lot of money this time around. But no matter what, the Skrulls showed such enthusiasm, and Uchiha Madara would not lose face. Although the food on this planet is indeed a little weird, Uchiha Madara doesn't dislike it either. However, the food on this table has not been eaten yet, and there are many people outside with all kinds of food in their hands and rushed over, filling the whole house to the brim. Sometimes adults are too embarrassed and let children come over. The children stared at Uchiha Madara with wide eyes, and Uchiha Madara could only be defeated and reluctantly accepted the food. In the end, Uchiha Madara and Carol couldn't eat any more, and finally Talos spoke up, preventing the continuous flow of food from continuing to come in. But in such a short period of time, Uchiha Madara already felt the enthusiasm of the Skrulls for himself. Advertisement. Finally, under the very warm invitation of Talos, both Uchiha Madara and Carol planned to stay here for a while. To be honest, the days here are still very leisurely. After all, everyone idolizes Uchiha Madara and Carol. But after spending some time on the Skrull planet, Uchiha Madara couldn't stand the Skrulls' enthusiasm. It is true that many people come to express their gratitude to Uchiha Madara every day. In the end, Uchiha Madara could only sigh helplessly, and then went to say goodbye to Talos. Although Taros was very reluctant, Uchiha Madara was very persistent, and Taros had nothing to do. As for Carol, she just followed Uchiha Madara. Since Uchiha Madara wanted to leave, Carol was ready to do her own business. Originally, Uchiha Madara just wanted to say goodbye to Talos, and then left quietly with Carol. But not expecting that when he was about to leave, Uchiha Madara found that basically everyone on the planet came out. This made the place that was not too wide to be crowded, and everyone's face was filled with reluctance. Seeing this grand scene, Uchiha Madara felt scalp numb and goosebumps all over his body. To say that Uchiha Madara is never afraid of anyone, but for such a sticky scene, Uchiha Madara always feels that he can't handle it. But everyone has come. Uchiha Madara can't drive everyone back, only Li Lihao can bite the bullet. After passing by, Uchiha Madara and Carol said a few scenes to the Skrulls together, and then prepared to leave. But the enthusiasm of these Skrulls was really overwhelming, not just so many people who came to see Uchiha Madara and Carol off. While Uchiha Madara and Carol were just leaving, these people also brought out all kinds of food, wine and specialties of the planet. But it's impossible for Uchiha Madara and Carol to bring so many things, so Uchiha Madara simply took a few items and stopped others from stuffing gifts. After some fiddling around, Uchiha and Carol finally got out of the Skrulls' Passion Uzumaki. When the planet that left the Skrulls arrived outside, Uchiha Madara and Carol looked at each other with a relieved smile on their faces. Chapter 312 mistakenly entered for automatic subscription. Advertisement. Chapter 312. Where is your next stop? If you're not busy, you can go for a walk with me. Carol glanced at Uchiha Madara and offered her own invitation. Originally Uchiha Madara was just wandering around without any plans at all. So naturally after receiving Carol's invitation, Uchiha Madara thought for a moment before agreeing. Uchiha Madara is also very curious about Carol's current work situation. I don't have anything to do anyway. If I don't disturb you, I would like to meet you. Uchiha Madara replied with a smile. Carol has indeed been alone for too long. Now that she has finally met a friend, she is naturally very happy. After getting Uchiha Madara's affirmative answer, Carol's smile never faded, and she couldn't wait to take Uchiha Madara to other planets. This visit is not the same as Uchiha Madara's previous performance. Uchiha Madara is purely to go to other planets to collect scenery. Uchiha Madara would have little direct contact with the planet's aboriginal people if there was no compulsion. After all, these people are very vigilant. There are 557 easy ways. Uchiha Madara doesn't want to make extra troubles. But Carol's job is to maintain peace in the universe, so he basically went to planets that encountered some difficulties and had to deal with the aborigines. To be honest, Uchiha Madara discovered that the Earth's environment is so peaceful after seeing Carol. Although various countries often have some frictions with each other, most of the conflicts are resolved through diplomatic means, and very few countries actually open fire directly. But every planet in the universe is different. Most planets are not like the Earth, and their resources are basically non-renewable. So in order to snatch, there may seem to be some insignificant resources in Uchiha Madara, and it is very likely that there will be a big fight, which will eventually evolve into a war between the two tribes. What Carol did was to balance the planets and not let this small war turn into a big B********************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************** trolls whose homes were plundered by invaders and thus displaced. After all, the races that can survive in the universe are not simple. Once they have other messy ideas because of resentment, then the entire universe will suffer. After following Carol through many planets, Uchiha Madara had to admire Carol's patience. After all, if it was Uchiha Madara, he would definitely not be able to hold on to such a boring job. Uchiha Madara came out to play to relax his mood, but after walking some planets with Carol, he found that his heart was too heavy. Because he couldn't stand this kind of atmosphere, Uchiha Madara decided to act separately from Carol. After all, Uchiha Madara really couldn't learn to be compassionate like Carol. After saying goodbye to Carol, Uchiha Madara literally wandered the universe for a while. Walking and walking, Uchiha Madara unconsciously walked to a planet that exudes cold air. This planet is desolate. And it seems that there is no distinction between day and night, and the entire planet is shrouded in darkness. And there seems to be no trace of human habitation on this planet. After Uchiha Madara set foot on the planet and walked inside for a while, he did not feel any traces of human beings. Although the planet may seem barren, for Uchiha Madara, it's simply the perfect location for an adventure. Therefore, walking on this desolate land, Uchiha Madara felt a sense of eagerness in his heart. Although very curious inside, Uchiha Madara is still unusually calm on the surface, always watching the surrounding wind and grass. After all, this AFBB planet does not seem to be inhabited by anyone, and it is only limited to appearance. No one knows if someone will secretly shoot cold shots. But Uchiha Madara is still very confident in his own strength. And even if there is an accident, even if the worst result Uchiha Madara can't beat that person, there is no pressure for Uchiha Madara to escape. Thinking of this, Uchiha Madara relaxed a little, and then continued to go deeper into the planet. Advertisement. Although he has always been very vigilant in his heart, Uchiha Madara basically tacitly agreed that this planet is uninhabited. But he never expected that when Uchiha Madara walked to a small hill in the shape of a chair, a very deep and hoarse voice suddenly came. Who are you? Are you sent by Asgard? The very hoarse voice asked. This sudden sound also surprised Uchiha Madara, but Uchiha Madara quickly stabilized his emotions and looked up in the direction where the sound came from. Then Uchiha Madara saw a man with gray-black skin suddenly appear on the empty chair. Even sitting, this man is a giant compared to Uchiha Madara. To be honest, Uchiha Madara's own height is no longer short, but this person Uchiha Madara gave him a rough look and estimated that it would have to be 2 meters above. Moreover, this giant's eyes are also blood red, and he does not seem to be a good person to get along with. Uchiha Madara measured it inwardly, but the whole person was still very calm on the surface. What is Asgard? I've never heard of it, I just came here to travel through this place. Uchiha Madara said calmly. Originally, this person supported his head with his hands, lowered his eyes and looked at the ground below, and did not put his eyes on Uchiha Madara at all. But hearing this, the man raised his head. What is this place? Uchiha Madara asked curiously. Hearing this, the person suddenly laughed, but because his voice was very hoarse, even laughing gave people a creepy feeling. This is Jotunheim, the domain of the frost giant. The giant deliberately created a very terrifying atmosphere and wanted to intimidate Uchiha Madara. But to be honest, Uchiha Madara was not frightened, she didn't have any reaction at all when she heard this. Seeing Uchiha Madara's calm eyes, the man sneered unhappily, and then looked at Uchiha Madara speechlessly. Don't you know where Jotunheim is? The giant asked in a speechless manner. Chapter 313 The Frost Giant Lao Fei for automatic subscription. Advertisement. Chapter 313 Frost Giant Lao Fei. To be honest, of course, Uchiha Madara didn't know where Jotunheim was, so he just nodded at the giant. Of course I don't know, and I don't know what the Frost Giant is it the name of your tribe? Uchiha Madara asked calmly. Probably didn't expect Uchiha Madara to be so ignorant, and the giant didn't know what kind of expression to use to face Uchiha Madara. And the skin of the well-known giant is too dark, basically blending with the surrounding environment, and Uchiha Madara can't see the subtle expressions on the giant's face. Where exactly did you come from, and you have never even heard of the giant iceberg? The giant's face was filled with suspicion and inquiry. Uchiha Madara does not hide his identity, after all, there is nothing to hide. However, Uchiha Madara can also see that this giant is a ruthless person, so he will not explain all his details foolishly. I came from a relatively remote planet, and I didn't know how to get here. Uchiha Madara said half-truth. Probably because he still has a good understanding of the outside world and knows that other planets are also inhabited, so the giant just nodded calmly. No wonder I didn't feel Asgard's breath from you, you should be from the atrium, right? The giant asked flatly. Although these words seem very simple, but when combined, Uchiha Madara feels as if she doesn't know each other. I don't understand at all where the atrium in the giant's mouth is, but it can be seen that when talking about the atrium, the expression on the giant's face is very disdainful. Combined with the laws of survival in the universe, Uchiha Madara immediately understood that atrium should be a planet with low force value, at least in the eyes of these aliens. I just don't know if there is any connection between the atrium and the earth. Although there are many thoughts flashed in my heart, Uchiha Madara will not say it all stupidly. Who are you? Are you the only one living on this planet? Uchiha Madara quickly changed the subject and asked. I am the frost giant Lao Fei, of course I am not the only one here, but also my companions. Lao Fei's tone was full of pride when he spoke his name. Advertisement. In fact, when he heard the names of Jotunheim and Asgard earlier, Uchiha Madara didn't have any fluctuations in his heart. Instead, he spread his thoughts out, and he didn't expect that these planets would also name each other. But when he heard the words Frost Giant and Laufey, some vague thoughts flashed in Uchiha Madara's mind. I always feel that I have forgotten something very important, but because it was too fast, Uchiha Madara didn't catch this flash of inspiration. Since you can come here alone, it means that you should be very capable, why don't we negotiate a deal? Lao Fei said enthusiastically. But after so many things, Uchiha Madara has long since stopped giving his trust to others easily. So Uchiha Madara didn't hear this compliment for Lao Fei, and just stared at Lao Fei with a very calm gaze. What deal? You talk about it. Uchiha Madara's tone was very flat, and he didn't seem to be looking forward to this deal. Although it seems very difficult to get along with, Lao Fei is still polite when facing Uchiha Madara. It's not really a big deal, you know, we've always had some not-so-friendly neighbors, Laufey said, meaning. But Uchiha Madara had no interest in listening to the old stories here, and after hearing this, she just glanced at Lao Fei impatiently. Just tell me what you want, I have no interest in your neighbors. Uchiha Madara urged impatiently. It was probably because of asking for help, so in the face of Uchiha Madara's urging, Laufey did not get angry. Simply put, I have a very important treasure. It could have been stolen by unfriendly neighbors, and I would like to ask you to help us get it back. 35. To be honest, this request is a bit baffling to Uchiha Madara. This is just the first meeting between Uchiha Madara and Laufey, and Uchiha Madara has no interest in participating in disputes between planets in the universe. This should have nothing to do with me, why should I help you? Uchiha Madara asked rhetorically with a speechless expression. Advertisement. 0. For flowers. But even if Lao Fei couldn't understand Uchiha Madara's tactful rejection, she just continued to talk on her own. As long as you help me get back our most important treasure, I can give you anything you want. Laufey said in a very big tone. But Uchiha Madara really has no interest, and Uchiha Madara does not think that what he wants needs to be obtained by Lao Fei. Shouldn't you atrium people like things like power status the most? As long as you can help me take back our treasure, I can make you the master of the atrium. There was a glint of ambition in Laufey's eyes, but for Uchiha Madara there was really no attraction whatsoever. If Uchiha Madara is interested, it is probably not difficult to dominate the world, and there is no need to rely on Laufey's power. Although it is not clear about Lao Fei's current real strength, Uchiha Madara can feel from his temperament that Lao Fei is a very dangerous person. But even Laufey himself didn't dare to take back his own treasure, so why would Uchiha Madara take risks for other people's things? So this time Uchiha Madara rejected Laufey very bluntly. But the premise of getting this is that I still have a life to enjoy it, and I don't think it's a fair deal. Uchiha Madara shrugged and said indifferently. I didn't expect that Uchiha Madara would be so oily and salty, and Laufey's mild aura changed immediately, and some looked at Uchiha Madara angrily. Not knowing what to think, Lao Fei suppressed her anger abruptly, and showed a not so obvious smile at Uchiha Madara. Why do you think so? It's actually a very simple matter, but it's not convenient for me to come forward. Lao Fei explained weakly. Uchiha Madara was very curious about what kind of lies Laufey could weave in order to achieve her goals. So Uchiha Madara nodded towards Laufey, motioning for Laufey to continue. Probably because of Uchiha Madara's performance in watching a good show, he mistakenly thought that Uchiha Madara was willing to accept this deal, so Lao Fei became very excited all of a sudden. Chapter 314 Norse Mythology for automatic subscription. Advertisement. Chapter 314 Norse Mythology. If not for an alien, Uchiha Madara thinks Laufey could have found a gold sales position on Earth. After all, talking about this transaction, Lao Fei was not as dull as before, and immediately became eloquent. To be honest, if Uchiha Madara is not well informed and has seen through the essence of Laufey, he might have been fooled into it. After all, what Lao Fei said was half truth, and it was too touching. In Laufey's mouth, the frost giant of Jotunheim is simply a pitiful character that anyone can step on. In Laufey's description, Jotunheim has a neighbor who lives above Asgard, a rude, savage man who likes to plunder. As for the frost giant, it has become a synonym for peace-loving, but pitiful and weak. 557. Under Asgard's oppression, a war broke out between Jotunheim and Asgard. But unfortunately, the strength of the frost giant was not as good as that of the aborigines in Asgard, so he was finally defeated and lost his treasure. They not only plundered our treasures, but also killed my people indiscriminately, not even giving up young babies. Lao Fei said angrily. Uchiha Madara snorted inwardly, obviously distrusting Lao Fei's statement, but on the surface he didn't say anything. As for Lao Fei, he was probably addicted to acting, and he was not discouraged when he didn't get a response from Uchiha Madara, but continued to act. Even my newly born child was taken away by the leader of Asgard. They are simply beasts, Laffy said through gritted teeth. After speaking, Laffy looked at Uchiha Madara with a look of anticipation, hoping that Uchiha Madara could take over the deal. Who is the leader of Asgard? Is he powerful? Uchiha Madara asked curiously. Hearing this question, Lao Fei's face froze, but after thinking for a while, he still said it. Advertisement. His name is Odin, and he has very powerful power, but he is no longer the same as he was back then. Laffy said with a sneer. Hearing this, Uchiha Madara raised her eyebrows and asked, if that's the case, why don't you go by yourself? From this question, Laffy has already seen that Uchiha Madara is not as deceptive as she estimated, so Laffy also corrected her attitude. It's not that I don't want to go, it's that I signed an agreement with Odin that I can't leave Jotunheim. Laffy's tone was full of helplessness. Uchiha Madara just nodded coldly when he heard the words, and didn't say whether he believed it or not. Facing Uchiha Madara's somewhat indifferent face, Lao Fei made persistent efforts and wanted to continue to persuade Uchiha Madara. But at this moment, both Uchiha Madara and Laffy heard what seemed to be some movement in the jungle outside. Who else will come here besides you? Uchiha Madara suddenly became vigilant, and looked at Lao Fei with sharp eyes. After seeing Uchiha Madara's eyes, Lao Fei knew that Uchiha Madara must have misunderstood, and she couldn't help but wave her hand. This person is definitely not arranged by me, nor is it from Jotunheim. It must be someone from Asgard who came here, Laffy said firmly. Hearing this, Uchiha Madara nodded, but he did not let his guard down. But anyway, since Laffy has already explained so, Uchiha Madara still has to give face. For the time being, let's take the people outside as those sent by Yasgod. Even though they were sent by Yasgod, Uchiha Madara didn't want to meet him at all. Uchiha Madara doesn't want to be a victim of the battle between these two planets. After all, it has nothing to do with Uchiha Madara. Therefore, when the footsteps gradually approached, Uchiha Madara walked directly behind Lao Fei's chair, completely hiding her figure. For Uchiha Madara's move, Laffy even had some joy. After all, Lao Fei also hopes to fool Uchiha Madara in the past and give her strength to snatch the treasure back for herself. Now she naturally doesn't want to reveal Uchiha Madara's identity. Advertisement. When Uchiha Madara had just found a suitable position to see what was going on below, a large group of people came in. These people don't look any different from Earth people, except that most of them are more burly than Earth people. From the faces of these people, Uchiha Madara can be sure that these people are not of the same race as the Frost Giants, so Uchiha Madara is just a good show. In fact, this group of people added up to only 6 or 7 people. The leader was a stupid big man in a red cloak, armor, and a hammer. Uchiha Madara didn't think they would take advantage of Lao Fei's hands. Sure enough, Laffy had already guessed the identities of these people from the very beginning. Didn't expect these people to be Asgard's people. Uchiha Madara knew the contradiction between these two planets, so the whole person was even more excited. The man in the lead really lived up to Uchiha Madara's expectations. He was a complete idiot, and he was outspoken and rude when he was still on someone else's territory. Laffy, now I want to ask you to surrender to Asgard in the name of Thor, the son of Odin, the father of the gods. Thor said in a loud voice. Originally, Uchiha didn't know much about these planets, and when he heard the terms Frost Giant, he was ignorant. But after hearing Thor's words, Uchiha Madara suddenly woke up and looked at the big stupid man outside with an unbelievable expression. If Uchiha Madara's memory is correct, these are all characters in Norse mythology. I didn't expect these 1.1 people to actually exist. It's just that the last time Uchiha Madara watched the fairy tale, it was many, many years ago, and she couldn't remember the specific plot clearly. So now we can only determine a general identity. The big stupid guy outside should be Thor. As for the people behind Uchiha Madara, he is not very clear. I didn't expect these gods to exist, and now Uchiha Madara is completely in the mood of watching monkeys in a zoo. The gods outside are naturally the monkeys in Uchiha Madara's mouth. In the short dozen seconds that Uchiha Madara was in deep thought, the situation outside was not very good. Laffy seemed to be angry, but probably because of the agreement he signed with Asgard, he didn't directly deal with these people. Chapter 315. Thor makes troubles for automatic subscription. Advertisement. Chapter 315 Thor makes troubles. For the sake of signing an agreement with Asgard, I will now give you one last chance, you should leave quickly. Laffy said lightly. If it was a smart person, they should have heard the anger contained in Lao Fei's calm tone, but it is a pity that Thor, who is the leader, is obviously not in this category. In addition to Thor, the youth who stood up this time surprised Uchiha Madara a little. Although Thor was obviously a guy with developed limbs and a simple mind, the person following him was very real-time, and he immediately expressed his approval after hearing Laffy's words. Thank you for your kindness. We don't want to make this matter a big deal. This time, we will take it as our offense. The young man said very politely. From the tone of voice and the light in his eyes, Uchiha Madara seemed to have guessed the identity of the young man. Black hair and black eyes look very shrewd and full of bad water. It is estimated that there is only Loki, the god of lies in Norse mythology. Sure enough, when this conjecture flashed in Uchiha Madara's mind, these people helped Uchiha Madara to verify his conjecture. What O5 are you talking about, Loki? How could we bow our heads to the frost giant? Thor looked at Loki angrily and said. Since this group of young people are so ignorant of current affairs, Lao Fei has probably endured it for a long time, and just used this as a reason. I saw Lao Fei wave his hand lightly. Then it flew up into the very quiet surroundings, and suddenly and silently, a large number of frost giants who looked like Lao Fei but were smaller than Lao Fei appeared. There should be a mortal hatred between the frost giants and the people of Aslot. The eyes of these frost giants were full of anger, and they wished they could strip Thor and the group of people alive. In the past, it was just that Lao Fei did not issue an order. Now, after obtaining Lao Fei's approval, these frost giants naturally all rushed towards Thorna. With such a commotion, the planet, which had no sound at first, was suddenly filled with the sound of fighting. Uchiha Madara is standing high up and can see very clearly what is going on below. Advertisement. This is the old lair of the frost giants, so basically all the frost giants are densely packed underneath. And the frost giants are still appearing in a steady stream. Although Thor and the others are powerful, they are invincible with 2 fists. From the first meeting, Uchiha Madara could see that Thor was a very confident person. But as the commander-in-chief, Thor has a very fatal flaw, that is, he is stubborn and can't see his weakness at all. Obviously, Uchiha Madara is very accurate in seeing people. Since Thor dared to bring such a few people to the frost giant's lair, it means that he is very confident in his own strength. But it was obvious that Thor had overestimated the combat effectiveness of his group. Under the siege of so many frost giants, Thor's group was obviously unable to do anything. Not only did the Rikido in his hand slow down unconsciously, but the speed was also much slower than before. On the battlefield, there is no shadow of swords and swords. If you are a little careless, others will seize the weakness, and what awaits is a fatal blow. A young man with long hair didn't pay attention at once, and was directly pierced by the frost giant's weapon in his abdomen. Seeing this scene, Thor's companions couldn't help but let out a piercing cry. Uchiha Madara frowned, obviously despising the fighting qualities of the group below. Originally, Thor still wanted to continue fighting, but his companions were seriously injured, so naturally it was impossible to let go of his companions. Thor could only push back the villains beside him while trying his best to lean towards his companions. In the end, he finally succeeded in pulling out the weapon from his companion, and at this time Loki shouted at Thor again to retreat. This time Thor finally recognized the reality, led his injured companion, and brought Loki's people to prepare to rush back to Asgard. Naturally, these frost giants would not allow this to happen, and they were chasing after Thor and the others. Lao Fei, who had always been sitting in a high position, couldn't help seeing this scene, and walked down from his position, probably to track Thor and others. Uchiha Madara saw that everyone had forgotten his existence, and shrugged a little boringly, but the excitement was still to be seen, and Uchiha Madara quickly followed. Advertisement. Soon Uchiha Madara followed behind the others to the edge of the cliff, when a huge monster with a very terrifying shape suddenly jumped up from the bottom of the cliff. This monster opened its bloody mouth and was about to pounce on Thor and the others. But now Thor is still capable of fighting. He raised the Thor's hammer in his hand, and then smashed it towards the head of the giant crocodile. Soon the giant crocodile fell to the ground. After the crocodile fell, Thor quickly raised his quake again and shouted loudly towards the sky. Heimdall, I know you can see all this, hurry up and take us back. Thor shouted very urgently. But after Thor's voice fell, there was no movement. At this time, Laufey had also appeared, looking at Thor with a bad look. Now when the two were about to start their hands, Thor's diagonally behind suddenly thought of a golden light of 557, and then a golden spherical thing appeared in front of everyone. Then after a burst of light dissipated, a man with a scepter and a tall horse appeared in everyone's sight. The man first glared at Thor and the others viciously, and then set his eyes on Lao Fei. Lao Fei, they are all still children, so this matter ends with the children being ignorant. The man's voice was very majestic, and he said in a kind tone. But it was obvious that Lao Fei didn't take this set, and hearing this was just a sneer. Odin, they are not too small, and this action completely ignores the agreement we signed. Laufey said rudely. To be honest, Uchiha Madara can see that Odin's physical condition is not very good now. Probably Odin should be very clear about his physical condition. Therefore, Odin didn't get angry after hearing Lao Fei's rude words. He still wanted to keep this matter private, and didn't want to make a big fuss. However, Uchiha Madara also roughly guessed Lao Fei's inner thoughts. Now that Odin is not in good health, it is naturally a good time for Lao Fei to seize power. So for Odin, who wants to seek peace, Laufey doesn't want to give face at all, just wants to make this matter as big as possible.